Angel Ormston was born in 1975 in Mentor-on-the-Lake, a quiet suburb of Ohio, USA. This area has about 7,000 residents, and everyone knows each other. Children from local families often get along and grow up together. Life here is very simple and similar. The local high school serves as the main place of learning for most young people in town. Angel is a friendly and cheerful girl. She particularly enjoys walking around the area with her friends and often drives around with loud music. Local teenagers often gathered at a large shopping mall in a nearby, bigger city, which featured restaurants, a movie theater, and various stores. It made sense that Angel would find a part-time job there. In the summer of 1992, she started working at a fast food restaurant as she prepared for her senior year of high school. This job not only allowed her to earn some pocket money but also helped her save up for college. Her daily routine was consistent. She worked in the mornings and spent time with friends afterward. On the evening of July 31, 1992, 17-year-old Angel planned to go to her restaurant to pick up her paycheck and do some shopping. She promised her mother, Jackie, she would be home before the mall closed. Initially, her mother was not concerned and went to bed, assuming she was out with friends. The next morning, she woke up to find Angel missing from her room. Despite this, she didn't worry too much because it was common for her daughter to stay over at friends' houses, especially on weekends and holidays, so she pushed her uneasy thoughts aside. In this close-knit community, crime was rare, and young people often visited each other without worry. However, Angel, a high school student, didn't always keep her mother informed, which led to concerns. Her mother didn't want to restrict Angel too much, allowing her daughter considerable freedom that matched her independent spirit. Angel's upbringing was relaxed. Her mother was adaptable and aimed to maintain a harmonious environment. Meanwhile, her father was often away as a long-distance truck driver. Despite the lack of strict rules or curfews in the Angel household, unsettling thoughts began to creep into Jackie's mind. Angel was missing all Saturday, and when her mother woke up on Sunday to find she still hadn't returned home, worries began to set in. She called families where Angel could stay, and her brother also went to the shopping center where she worked. Upon arriving at the parking lot, Angel's brother noticed her Honda Civic, which heightened his concern. He hoped to find Angel inside but instead found her purse, comb, and other personal items left on the driver's seat, indicating she might have vanished. He checked the burger joint where she worked but learned she hadn't shown up for a couple of days. Alarmed, he contacted Jackie, their mother, who hurried to the shopping center to retrieve Angel's car and uncover the truth while pushing aside her fears. Initially, she hoped it was just a series of coincidences. Angel often went out at night with her best friend, Stacy. That day, Stacy's family could not be reached, which gave Jackie some peace of mind. Nonetheless, anxiety grew as Jackie drove around the mall looking for Angel, but she found no trace of her daughter. Friends who did manage to contact her hadn't seen Angel since Friday. By 8 p.m., Jackie still couldn't reach Angel, deepening her worry. Jackie finally decided to report her daughter Angel as missing by going to the police. Although Angel was last seen on July 31st, Jackie did not visit the station until August 2nd. This delay raised suspicions among the police, but Jackie explained that she believed she needed to wait 48 hours before reporting someone missing. Jackie provided detailed information about Angel, including her life and relationships. Jackie asserted that, up until the very last moment, she was not worried that anything serious had happened to Angel. On the morning of Monday, August 2nd, Jackie managed to reach Stacy, who confirmed Jackie's fears. Stacy had spent the entire weekend at her sister's house and hadn't seen Angel. She was shocked to learn that her friend had been missing for over 2 days. Stacy tried to contact some mutual friends, but none had seen Angel. Following this, Jackie provided the police with new information, prompting them to initiate an active search for Angel. The police first examined Angel's car, which showed no signs of a struggle. The car was in normal condition, with no blood, signs of theft, or forced entry. The officers believed Angel may have left the car willingly. Given her age, they suggested she could have run away, but Jackie rejected this idea, citing their good relationship. Angel was not involved with banned substances and had always remained calm during her teenage years. Despite her independent nature, she was not the type to run away. In fact, she had been making future plans, including furthering her education at university. Detectives worked extensively to investigate Angel's disappearance. They suspected she might have been kidnapped from the car and collected many fingerprints at the scene. Although there were numerous prints, all belonged to family and close friends. Despite this, every individual had to be investigated to clear them as suspects since there were no other leads. The investigation began with Angel's father, a truck driver, but he was quickly ruled out because he had a verified alibi. He was in another state when his daughter went missing. Next, detectives looked into Angel's mother, Jackie. Her refusal to take a polygraph test raised significant suspicion and drew the attention of the investigators. They noted her delay in contacting the police and her decision to take Angel's car from the parking lot soon after learning about the disappearance, which further fueled suspicions. The police lacked the authority to compel her to take a polygraph test, and there was no direct evidence against her. As a result, the investigation continued with Jackie being the primary suspect. Jackie claimed that on the evening when Angel left home, she intended to go to a burger place. However, interviews with local staff revealed that Angel never arrived to pick up her paycheck that day. Investigators seized the opportunity to gather more information from Angel's colleagues. They quickly eliminated Jackie from the list of suspects due to Angel's good relationship with her family. However, they developed several other theories, including a suspicious connection to a former manager known for inappropriate behavior toward female employees. Investigators suspected that the former manager had been spying on female staff while they changed into their work uniforms. Later, he was fired for a harassment incident. Several female employees reported that this manager had touched them inappropriately. When the police investigated him, they discovered he had a criminal record for inappropriate behavior with minors, making him the main suspect. Other women also mentioned that he frequently focused on Angel, often looking for chances to be alone with her in the kitchen and making inappropriate comments. When this was discovered, the detectives were so focused on the case that they overlooked Jackie. The former manager was quickly located and interviewed, but he denied any involvement in Angel's disappearance. He said that she hasn't seen him since they worked together. He claimed that, on the day she went missing, he was far from his hometown and provided a timesheet showing that he was at another location of the fast food chain that day. Despite this evidence, detectives did not exclude him as a suspect and continued to question everyone at the restaurant, including both staff and management. Through their investigation, they uncovered a secret that Angel had kept from her family. She had been fired for consistently being late. While she was indeed heading to the restaurant to collect her final paycheck, this revelation did not provide any new leads regarding her disappearance. Gradually, all of Angel's co-workers were ruled out as suspects because they had alibis. Neither Angel's former manager nor her mother was considered a viable suspect in the case, making it difficult for the police to conduct their investigation. Communication with Angel's closest friends did not reveal any new information. Everyone was shocked at the idea that someone in her circle might wish her harm. She was gentle, trusting, and usually avoided conflict. However, her trusting nature made her vulnerable to someone who might manipulate her into a dangerous situation. After a long period without contact, fears grew that Angel had died. She hadn't reached out to anyone, appeared in public, or used any payment methods. Given these circumstances, the police decided to re-examine the people closest to her, as those responsible for such crimes are often found among acquaintances. The focus shifted to her best friend, Stacy. Although they had spoken to her briefly before, this time the interview lasted over 4 hours. From the start, Stacy expressed a strong willingness to help but firmly denied any involvement. She was cleared as a suspect when she provided a confirmed alibi. She had spent the entire weekend at her sister's house and they had been together the whole time, cooking side by side. The police are trying to ask Stacy if she knows about Angel's relationship with a man. Stacy revealed that Angel had recently become interested in a young man named Mark Sotka, a 19-year-old who had just graduated with honors from their high school. Stacy explained that Angel had been in love with Mark for a long time and even hoped to start a serious relationship with him. However, Angel was very private, especially about her relationships, and only Stacy knew about Mark, not even sharing it with her mother. During the questioning, Stacy reveals that Angel was aware of her pregnancy shortly before she disappeared. They had talked several times about the possibility of telling Mark about the baby, and Angel was optimistic that he would accept her and the child, viewing it as the start of their life together. Stacy was doubtful, but Angel was convinced she could build a family with Mark. The detectives decided to investigate Mark's background before confronting him. It appeared that Mark was not ready for fatherhood. Just before Angel went missing, he started college, which suggests he may have only considered Angel a short fling while planning to focus on his studies. They found no incriminating evidence against him, as he had a clean record and a solid reputation in school. Eventually, Mark was called to the police station for questioning. He was surprised to learn that he was considered a suspect in Angel's disappearance. He denied any involvement and refuted Stacy's claims about their relationship. When he learned that Angel might be pregnant, he laughed it off, dismissing it as a fabrication by his girlfriend. He admitted to having had a brief encounter with Angel at the beginning of summer but said they had not met again since then. Additionally, he had been in a relationship with another girl for 2 years. To support his claims, he needed to provide proof and a reliable alibi. Mark testified that he left work at 5 p.m. on July 31, 1992 to go to a shopping mall. He intended to buy a gift for his girlfriend and then meet friends at a pizzeria. The police began to investigate his account closely. His employment at a car dealership was verified through his timesheet, which matched his claimed working hours. Additionally, they found a receipt for the gift purchase. Several friends from work supported his story, confirming he was at the pizzeria until around 9 p.m. The only inconsistency was that some staff members at the places he visited that evening did not remember him. However, Mark willingly took a polygraph test, which showed no evidence of his involvement in any crime. As a result, he was cleared as a suspect. The investigation hit another dead end, prompting detectives to revisit earlier theories of escape or kidnapping. Discovering that Angel might have been pregnant reinforced these theories. Her family may have opposed her having a child at just 17, leading her to potentially run away to start a new life with the baby. Unfortunately, these possibilities did not bring them any closer to finding her. Frustrated by the lack of progress, Angel's mother decided to take action. She reached out to the community through local media in hopes of gathering information. Her appeal successfully raised awareness about Angel's disappearance, turning the incident into a well-known topic of discussion. Friends and concerned individuals joined in, distributing thousands of leaflets. Charities became involved, and a fund was established, raising $10,000 as a reward for anyone who could provide useful information for the investigation. In the following weeks, the police department received numerous requests for information, which opened several new leads for the investigation. Detectives conducted thorough checks, but these efforts did not yield any significant results. Frustrated, Angel's family made the decision to hire a private detective. When Angel's father returned from a trip, he was hopeful that it would help locate his daughter, unlike the ineffective efforts of the police. However, despite the detectives' hard work, no new information emerged. 3 months passed, and there were still no updates on Angel's case. By this time, her friends had almost lost hope, but her mother remained determined. Angel's mother, Jackie, even altered the message on their answering machine, leaving a note for her daughter in the hopes that she would eventually call. She refused to believe that anything bad had happened to Angel. Meanwhile, the entire city was critical of the police for their lack of progress, which led to increased pressure on law enforcement to revisit existing leads and suspects. Eventually, detectives began to focus on a man who was engaged to Angel's best friend. He was very interested in finding out what happened to her and was vocal in his criticism of the investigation. His name was Candle. Even though he showed a strong interest in Angel, he did not give any information to the detectives or the media. It was believed that he had attempted to start a relationship with Angel and was rejected, which might have led to her kidnapping or murder. On the day she went missing, he was working at a shoe store in the shopping mall where she was last seen. He had a confirmed alibi for that time, but after work, he could have committed a crime, especially since he was nearby. He allowed investigators to search his car, but nothing suspicious was found. The investigation had reached another dead end. On December 15, 1992, 4.5 months after Angel's disappearance, a local resident was out hunting with his dog. While walking through the forest, the dog became uneasy and led its owner away. This took them to a drainage ditch, where the hunter noticed something wrapped in a sheet and tied with a rope. Upon closer inspection, he saw a human hand protruding from the package. The man quickly contacted the police. When law enforcement arrived, they discovered a body in an advanced state of decomposition. Identification was possible only through dental records, which confirmed that it was 17-year-old Angel Ormston, who had been reported missing. On December 16th, Angel's family was informed of her death. An autopsy showed she had suffered blunt force trauma to the head, which might not have been fatal. However, she had sustained 2 stab wounds to the chest, both delivered with significant force, impacting her heart. As a result, she bled out quickly and died. Investigating her death was complicated by decomposition, but fibers resembling those from a blue carpet were found at the scene. The police compiled a list of all homes associated with Angel, including those of neighbors, family, and friends, in search of a home that might have green carpeting. One key location of interest was the house belonging to Mark, who might have been the father of Angel's unborn child. At the time of the murder, the house was empty as it was for sale. Witnesses claimed they saw Mark enter the house with a girl who matched Angel's description. Although the house had been sold by then, the new owners allowed detectives to inspect it. Most rooms had been renovated, except for the basement. Upon entering the basement, the police found a blue carpet that matched the fibers collected from the scene. Additionally, a clothesline similar to the one used by the killer to move the body was discovered in the laundry room, matching the one found on Angel. The new owners reported that both the carpet and the clothesline had been left behind by the previous owners. These items were sent for forensic analysis, and tests confirmed that the microscopic fibers and the rope matched those used in the crime. Furthermore, a bloody fingerprint was discovered in the basement. 5 months after Angel disappeared, on December 31, 1992, 19-year-old Mark Sotka was arrested on suspicion of murder. During his arrest, he insisted that the police had no evidence against him and claimed he was not the person they were looking for. He immediately refused to cooperate with detectives, prompting forensic experts to conduct a detailed examination of his car. They discovered that although he had attempted to clean the interior, a few small drops of blood remained. During questioning, Mark eventually broke down due to the overwhelming evidence against him. He admitted to committing an act he described as stupid. When pressed for more details, he confessed to murdering Angel. Mark explains that he invited Angel to his house for intimate relations again, but things changed that night when she revealed that she was pregnant and that he was the father. This news triggered a violent outburst from him. He demanded that she get an abortion, but she refused. An argument ensued, during which Angel threatened to cause problems. In a fit of rage, Mark struck her several times in the face. Angel fell in the garage, and Mark, grabbing a knife, returned to the basement and stabbed her twice in the chest. Afterward, he calmly met with his friends at a pizzeria, chatting and laughing as if nothing had happened. Later that evening, he wrapped her body in a sheet, secured it with a clothesline, and transported it in the trunk of his car to a wooded area, where he left it in a ditch. Afterward, Mark returned home, covered up the evidence of the crime, and cleaned his car. After 5 months of investigation, he was arrested as the killer. During questioning, Mark confessed to first-degree murder and led authorities to the location where he disposed of the knife used in the crime. Despite thorough searches, the knife was never found. However, he had limited chances of proving his innocence. The motive for the attack stemmed from Angel's pregnancy, which disrupted his future plans. Mark had no intention of continuing his relationship with her and wanted to focus on someone else. In February 1993, to avoid the death penalty that was in place at the time, Mark officially admitted his guilt. Consequently, He was sentenced to life in prison but became eligible for parole after 30 years. Angel's family pointed out that Mark showed no remorse or compassion, which explained how he was able to deceive the polygraph test. Following his sentencing, he was taken to jail. After serving 20 years, Mark utilized an old Ohio law that allowed him to request a parole hearing after 2/3 of his minimum sentence. His family was informed, and Angel's relatives increased their efforts to prevent him from being released. Their efforts were successful, and he was denied parole in July 2023. After serving 30 years, Mark appeared before the parole board again, but this time, Angel's family opposed his release once again. As a result, he remains in prison. Angel's family expressed their relief to the media, calling it a significant victory for them. Her mother stated that their family would continue to fight to keep the killer incarcerated and would never forgive Mark, who has never expressed remorse or sought forgiveness for taking Angel's life and the life of her baby. In the Italian province of Bergamo, the municipality of Cologno al Sirios has around 10,000 residents. Femicides are a significant concern here, with many women being harmed by their former or current partners. In 2019, Zinaida Solinari, a 36-year-old woman originally from a small village in Moldova, was living in Cologno al Sirios. She had resided in Italy for nearly 15 years and had made some progress toward achieving her dreams. Like many young women who leave their home countries in search of a better life, Zinaida aimed to establish herself abroad. She arrived in Italy in 2004 at the age of 21, hoping to find employment and eventually a husband to create a happy life. Right after moving to Bergamo, Zinaida began her new life and work. She was a vibrant and attractive young woman who received a lot of attention from men, but she was not looking for a short-term fling. She wanted to find a husband. A few years later, she met a man named Maurizio Quattrochi, who was 11 years older than her. He appeared trustworthy and kind. She was immediately drawn to him. It's important to mention that Zinaida lived with her daughter, whom she had at the age of 16. At the time of their move, her daughter was 5 years old. Maurizio welcomed her daughter as if she were his own and later adopted her. Zinaida hadn't yet made many friends in Bergamo. From the start, Maurizio treated her and her daughter beautifully, offering a sense of security that won Zinaida over. They began a relationship that quickly became serious. Maurizio was a painter and bricklayer with a troubled past that included several criminal offenses, which he chose not to share with Zinaida, a fact she later discovered. He had been convicted multiple times for buying stolen property and had several instances of driving under the influence. Despite this history, he treated Zinaida and her daughter with great care. In late 2004, they married. The following year they welcomed their first daughter, with a second daughter arriving 4 years later. Maurizio was dedicated to his family, but he had a fiery temperament. Zinaida affectionately called him a hot Italian, believing it to be part of his charm. She worked to smooth over any tensions. For many years, their relationship appeared loving and understanding. However, beneath the surface, there were troubling issues. Zinaida's family soon learned about Mauricio's bad temper. He was impulsive and aggressive. His jealousy began to strain their relationship, particularly after Zinaida took a job as a waitress at a popular restaurant in mid-2019. Maurizio was unhappy with her job because many men frequented the restaurant, and his financial struggles heightened his jealousy. Especially as Zinaida's salary allowed her more independence, made her the family's primary earner. At the restaurant, Zinaida met a woman who was also from Eastern Europe. They discovered they had a lot in common. Her colleagues soon noticed the tension between Zinaida and her husband, Maurizio. During Zinaida's first week at her new job, Maurizio came to the restaurant because she hadn't answered his calls. He raised his voice at her, and her colleague could see that Zinaida flinched at every loud sound, revealing her fear of her husband. After that incident, Zinaida shared with her colleague that Maurizio was jealous, upset because she had become more independent and had slipped out of his control. Despite this, Zinaida was determined to stand her ground, not give in to his demands, so she continued working at the restaurant, hoping that her husband would eventually adjust and stop pressuring her. The situation was worsening, seemed to be getting out of control. Her colleague noticed that after several months of working at the restaurant, Zenaida had lost a significant amount of weight and appeared very anxious, which was quite concerning. Zenaida usually dealt with her problems on her own, seldom talked about her life. However, it was clear that her marriage was failing. After 13 years, Zenaida realized it was time for a change. She understood how dangerous her husband was after a fight that occurred just before the tragedy. Unfortunately, she didn't have time to respond. Around 2 a.m. on October 6, 2019, the city police received a report about a woman who had been injured. When officers arrived at Via Alberto de Giussano, it was too late to help her. She had already died. The woman was 36-year-old Zenaida Solinari. Police quickly interviewed her family and friends. Zenaida was found in the courtyard of her sister Oksana Solinari's house, where she had been living recently. Oksana had moved to Italy after Zenaida, and her life had been more settled since marrying Lucio Carlo Di Dio. Oksana informed the police about the difficulties Zenaida faced in her marriage. She believed the event was a result of Mauricio's ongoing aggressive behavior. Just before the tragedy, Zenaida had made the decision to leave her husband, believing it was her only option after a recent family conflict. In private, Zenaida confided in Oksana that Maurizio had threatened her, saying if she tried to leave, he would kill her and then take his own life. From that point, Zenaida understood that the man she thought was her protector could actually be a serious threat to her safety. She shared her experiences of aggression, physical abuse, and how she had to call the police after her last fight with Maurizio. At that time, Zenaida had 3 children, but her husband was indifferent and consumed by jealousy. He was behaving violently, and it was only when the police arrived that he calmed down. Although Zenaida chose not to file formal charges against him, she spoke to the police out of fear for her safety. She thought that moving out of the house was the best way to protect herself and her children. After leaving, she hoped Maurizio would eventually calm down so they could officially get divorced. However, Zenaida did not recognize that the period when a woman tries to escape the control of an abusive partner is often the most dangerous time, both during the decision to separate and the act of leaving. Zenaida opened up to several friends about her husband's frequent episodes of intense jealousy. She shared that he not only yelled at her but also physically assaulted her. However, when speaking with detectives, she did not mention the threats of violence. She minimized the severity of her situation, claiming that her husband had never physically harmed her until mid-2019, despite his aggressive demeanor and constant emotional pressure. Zenaida believed she could manage her circumstances alone. Just 2 hours before she was murdered, a patrol of carabinieri drove by her sister's house. Oksana was aware that Maurizio was searching for his wife. He had come to visit her that evening and hadn't been seen since. Concerned for safety, Oksana called the police. The carabinieri checked the area but left without finding anything suspicious. Later that evening, Oksana's husband mentioned seeing a car that looked like Mauricio's parked in a dead end, but they could not locate its owner. If the police officers had been more vigilant, they might have noticed something amiss and potentially prevent the crime. Maurizio Quattrochi was 47 years old, had a history of a bad temper. Recently, he lost his job as a bricklayer, a position he had held for several years. This wasn't the first instance of him being fired. He was previously let go from his job as a cook at a pizzeria due to conflicts with management. Although Maurizio had always been aggressive, Zenaida usually managed to calm him down. However, after losing his job, his anger intensified. He struggled with the pressure of not being able to support his family, which only added to his irritation, especially towards Zenaida's accomplishments. On the evening of October 5th, he was waiting for Zenaida to return home while intoxicated. Just days earlier, Zenaida and her children had moved in with her sister, Oksana, seeking refuge without revealing her plans. She felt there were no other options for support and thought that staying with her sister would allow the children to continue going to their previous school. Zenaida also underestimated the likelihood of Maurizio acting on his threats. She wanted to avoid causing additional stress for their children. The next day after Zenaida moved out, Maurizio quickly found her at his relative's house. They had another uncomfortable conversation, but this time Zenaida chose not to involve the police. She wanted to prevent anyone else from getting hurt and still hoped that Maurizio, with whom she had spent 13 years, would act rationally. Sadly, he had started to see her as an object, making rationality unlikely. Tragically, Zenaida was found outside her sister's house with several stab wounds, some of which were life-threatening. The attacker had cut her throat and stabbed her in the chest, leading to severe blood loss. She died before the ambulance could reach her. At that moment, her 3 daughters were asleep just a few meters away from their mother. When the carabinieri arrived, Maurizio was already gone, having fled the scene of the crime. However, Zenaida's sister had important information about him. Oksana, who was close to her sister, knew details about Mauricio's job, his favorite hangouts, and his car. Her husband, Lucio, noted that an old Peugeot 206 was parked in an alley and that car drove away in it right after the attack. Witnesses provided the police with the vehicle's license plate, allowing them to start the search for him immediately. The police first searched Mauricio's house but found no one there. They then checked his previous workplaces but found them empty as well. He had gone on the run, but there were only a few possible escape routes. The carabinieri were pursuing the suspect and were closing in. However, they worried he might abandon his car and hide in the wilderness. The police monitored checkpoints and cameras along the potential escape paths. Maurizio was quickly located, and a large-scale operation was planned to capture him. They set up checkpoints on the road and stopped cars that matched his description. Despite this, Maurizio managed to briefly slip through the barrier. His escape lasted just under 16 hours. Eventually, a man matching his description was seen walking along the road, several hundred kilometers from the murder scene. Surprisingly, he hadn't traveled far from Oksana's house, as if he was unsure of what to do and was aimlessly wandering while trying to come up with a plan. He was stopped and arrested at the city entrance. The alleged criminal was taken to Treviglio station, charged with first-degree murder, and sent to prison in Bergamo. At this point, Maurizio claimed that Zenaida's death was accidental, insisting he never wanted to hurt his beloved wife. However, her sister, Oksana, reminded him of his earlier threats to kill Zenaida. Oksana was aware that Maurizio had long suspected Zenaida of cheating, frequently accusing her of having affairs with other men, even though there was no truth to those claims. She firmly believed that Zenaida had remained faithful in their marriage, but Maurizio was not convinced. The situation may have worsened due to Mauricio's job loss and Zenaida's newfound independence. She recognized that their family was struggling and that they needed money for basic necessities. Taking a job at a restaurant was her way of supporting herself, her husband, and their children. Unbeknownst to her, this decision stirred intense anger in Maurizio. Rather than being encouraging, he grew increasingly jealous and resentful. His behavior could have been exacerbated by the depression often linked to such issues, but this did not lessen his guilt. Mauricio's behavior was similar to stalking. Maurizio bombarded Zenaida with constant work calls, which severely affected her ability to perform her job. He insisted on constant contact, even asked for photos to prove where she was, what she was doing, and who she was with. Her employer noticed her frequent distractions and advised her to turn off her mobile phone, hoping this would alleviate the situation with her husband. Unfortunately, this only made things worse. Rather than stop his interference, Maurizio started arriving at the restaurant and causing dramatic scenes. Each time, his behavior became more concerning. All these incidents were verified by a friend of Zenaida, whom she met at the restaurant. Although Zenaida preferred not to complain, she shared with her sister that she was overwhelmed by ongoing scandals at home. After long days at work, she would return to face constant accusations of infidelity and jealousy-driven arguments. Trying to defend herself felt pointless. By the end of summer 2019, she experienced physical violence at home for the first time. Instead of addressing their problems and looking for a job, Maurizio turned to drinking, which led to conflicts, left her with bruises. After interviewing the suspect, detectives determined that jealousy was the motive behind this act of femicide. They investigated Mauricio's background to confirm the statements made by Zenaida's relatives and friends. He seemed to be a typical manipulator who was losing control over Zinaida. After losing his last job due to a conflict with his boss, he could only find odd jobs that didn't provide enough income to support the family. This situation led him to alcoholism and increasingly abusive behavior. In contrast, Zinaida was working as a waitress and occasionally as a hotel maid. She also earned extra income through modeling. It became clear that she no longer needed this relationship. From what was known, Maurizio spoke negatively about Zinaida's modeling career, convinced that it was linked to other men, leading him to believe that she was unfaithful. Although he could not find any evidence to support this, he was equally unable to convince his spouse otherwise. After the Carabinieri were first called due to a domestic dispute involving threats, they assessed Mauricio's behavior and advised Zinaida to move out. It was generally accepted that her refusal to file a complaint contributed to her death. Maurizio continued to assert that his attack was unintentional, claiming he simply wanted to talk to his wife and that she was the one who first exhibited aggression. However, the evidence gathered during the investigation contradicted these assertions. Zinaida had remained calm, diffusing all hostility, and consistently tried to avoid conflict. In contrast, everyone who knew Maurizio well described him as extraordinarily aggressive, hot-tempered, and controlling. The fact that the Carabinieri could not find him during their patrol confirmed suspicions that he had set up an ambush and was in hiding. He possessed a kitchen knife, which became the weapon used in the murder. It could not have ended up in his hands by chance. He had taken it with him intentionally, having planned to confront Zinaida from the very beginning. According to the reconstruction of events, late on Saturday evening, Zinaida was returning home from a night shift at the restaurant. The last message she received from her loved ones was a warning. Around midnight, Oksana wished her sister a safe journey and advised her to be careful. When speaking to the police, Oksana expressed that she had a bad feeling, which is why she wrote this message to Zinaida. She had no idea that the future killer was already waiting for his victim outside the house. Zinaida barely managed to stop near the gate of Oksana's house and got out of her car. She had walked only 3 meters when Maurizio attacked her with a kitchen knife, striking her several times with force. However, Zinaida did not lose consciousness. Instead, she began to scream. This noise awakened her neighbors and her sister, who called for help. Unfortunately, the criminal had enough time to inflict a fatal wound on his victim. Even after the neighbors raised a ruckus, he continued the attack, unable to control the anger fueled by jealousy. Realizing what had happened, Maurizio jumped into his car and began to flee. However, this reckless escape was ill-conceived, as there was nowhere for him to hide. The day of Zinaida Solinari's funeral was declared the day of mourning in the city. This tragic news shocked not only the numerous members of the city's Moldovan community but also all other residents. Flags were lowered, and many local establishments were closed. A memorial service was held, attended by an Orthodox priest from Bergamo. Hundreds of concerned citizens came to the church for the vigil, all appalled by the tragic fate of this kind and beautiful woman. White flowers lay on the white coffin, and red ribbons, a symbol of the fight against femicide, were tied at the feet of local residents. Red roses were placed around a fountain in the main square, and candles were lit. Meanwhile, the suspect remained defiant. His story changed several times, resulting in no one believing him anymore. During another interrogation, Maurizio claimed that the meeting was simply to communicate with his wife. After consuming a considerable amount of alcohol, he insisted that he felt a surge of jealousy, which had become increasingly frequent. Throughout the day, he had contacted his wife. Even if Maurizio genuinely wanted to know what his wife was doing that evening, the response did not satisfy him. He attacked her while checking her mobile phone. The Carabinieri discovered that earlier that evening, at about 6 p.m., Oksana had informed her that Maurizio had come to her house looking to see his children. Naturally, Zinaida refused, as she immediately noticed that he was drunk. She told him he could only see his daughters the next day when he had sobered up. This likely intensified Mauricio's jealousy, suggesting that he may have been lying in wait near the house for several hours before attacking his victim. Initially, Maurizio insisted that it was all an accident, then claimed he did not remember anything. His final explanation was that he did not want to kill Zenaida but was unable to control himself due to jealousy. His lies did not clarify whether he had truly been waiting there all that time with a knife or if he had left and returned after the carabinieri had checked the area. Maurizio maintained that he could not recall anything because of the alcohol he had consumed and even denied bringing a knife with him, claiming he could have found it near his sister Zenaida's house. During interrogations, he also stated that his wife loved him, that she did not deserve such an end, that he believed until the very end that they could be together again and everything would work out. Oksana and Lucio countered this claim, stating that it was a lie. Zenaida had fled because she was afraid of him, felt under constant pressure and control. At the hearing, one of the first to speak was her sister, 32-year-old Oksana. She recounted how she heard a muffled cry for help in her sleep. Instinctively, she felt it was Zenaida. Upon opening her eyes, she heard it again and realized she was right. She immediately woke her husband, and together they rushed into the street, where they saw Maurizio. The attack was ongoing. He was holding Zenaida by the throat, striking her repeatedly. The prosecutor's office rightly labeled this act an extreme form of cruelty, as the criminal was completely out of control. Even in front of witnesses, the assault continued. This brutal act left 3 children without a mother and father. Oksana's words were substantiated by her husband, Lucio, his brother, Alessandro, and her neighbor, Riccardo Pacini. They all witnessed the moment of the attack but did not have time to intervene. Everything happened too quickly. When they approached, Maurizio fled. Zenaida's 18-year-old daughter, Vitalia, also participated in the trial. Mauricio's 2 youngest daughters, aged 9 and 13, were not present in the courtroom. They did not want to interact with their father, who had left them orphaned. The girls were placed in Oksana's care. During the hearing, a forensic expert testified that he found 18 wounds on Zenaida's body. 3 of these wounds were inflicted on her face and were identified as defensive injuries on the victim's arms. Another 8 wounds were located on her neck, indicating that this was likely the target area of the killer, as his actions did not correspond with typical unintentional murder. One of the most dangerous blows punctured the aorta at the base of her neck, resulting in severe bleeding. Just a few minutes later, Zenaida lost consciousness and subsequently died. Her relatives held her in their arms during her final moments as she faded before their eyes, bleeding to death until the rescue service arrived. Her last words were, "I can't breathe anymore." Only after hearing her last words did he decide to flee. At that moment, a kitchen knife fell to the ground, which was later found by the police. The prosecution insisted that the attack was premeditated, as the knife found matched one from Mauricio's kitchen set, which was missing from his home. The lawyer tried to justify the defendant in an implausible manner, claiming that he had found a blade near his sister Zenaida's house. Despite this, Mauricio's lawyer continued to advocate for a mitigated sentence and insisted on a psychiatric examination. According to the lawyer, there had been a systematic deterioration in Mauricio's mental state, which became apparent several days before the crime. On that day, Zenaida stated that he had become obsessive, possessive, and much more aggressive than usual. Just before the incident, Zenaida told her sister that her husband had tried to strangle her with a belt from a robe. When Oksana's husband came to help with a move, he noticed that Zenaida's internet cables had been cut, which seemed strange. Furthermore, Maurizio took her mobile phone, indicating that the situation was spiraling out of control. The lawyer believed these were signs of mental problems. However, the relatives of Zenaida did not want to allow the killer to receive a lenient sentence due to claims of insanity. Oksana claimed that her sister had considered breaking up 8 years before the tragedy. Oksana said Zenaida felt like a victim and was afraid that her husband could be dangerous, but she stayed in the relationship for the sake of their children. Zenaida's relatives said she described a miserable 10-year marriage. Maurizio ended his own life, as he had promised, while in custody during the trial. His lawyer commented on his client's death. The hearing shocked Maurizio. He could not bear the shame and disgrace, especially since some aspects, according to him, did not correspond to reality. He was particularly taken aback by witness testimonies that described 10 years of torment, during which his wife had suffered and was denied a divorce. Maurizio expressed regret for his actions but realized he could not turn back time to alter the circumstances of his wife's death. He feared that his daughters would be compelled to testify against him, which would have been an even greater blow. Consequently, Maurizio decided to end his life. He left several suicide notes for his family, but their contents remain unknown. The brutal murder of Zinaida Solinari on October 6, 2019, in Cologno al Sirios marked a devastating loss for her family and the community. Fleeing an abusive marriage, Zinaida sought refuge with her sister Oksana days earlier, hoping to protect her 3 daughters. Her courage to reclaim her independence triggered Maurizio Quattroci's jealousy, culminating in a premeditated attack that ended her life. The court's focus on the crime's brutality underscored the gravity of femicide, a persistent issue in Bergamo, where women like Zinaida face danger from intimate partners. Zinaida's story is a stark reminder of the urgent need for stronger protections and awareness to prevent such tragedies, ensuring no woman pays the ultimate price for seeking freedom. On March 1, 2019, it was a chilly Friday evening in Harold Hill. Amy's Park, a popular local spot, was filled with the usual crowd of teenagers unwinding after a busy week. 17-year-old Jody Chesney, an energetic student, was at the center of it all. She sat with her boyfriend, Eddie Coyle, and a group of 5 friends on a picnic bench, enjoying their time together as laughter mixed with the sounds from a portable speaker. As the clock approached 9:25 p.m., the atmosphere in Amy's Park changed. Earlier, around 9 p.m., Jody's group had noticed 2 people hanging around, but they didn't think much of it since strangers often visit parks. The 2 left quietly and disappeared into the night. However, about 30 minutes later, they returned, but this time, they weren't just passing by. The 2 figures approached Jody's group deliberately, moving swiftly through the darkness. Without any warning or conversation, one of them suddenly attacked. Screams echoed through the air as Eddie caught her when she collapsed, leaving her friends in shock. Unfortunately, despite the paramedics' efforts, they couldn't save her. Metropolitan Police have sealed off the park and launched a murder investigation. Harold Hill was not known for such incidents. While London did face issues with knife crime, Amy's Park was considered a safe haven for children. Neighbors placed flowers and written tributes at the park's entrance. Purple ribbons, Jody's favorite color, were tied to fences. The police pledged to find answers, but time was of the essence. Each hour without a lead made the investigation more difficult. First, let's explore Jody's life. After her parents separated when Jody was 6, her father, Peter, became a devoted single parent to Jody and her older sister, Lucy. Their home was filled with love, despite the challenges they faced. Peter described Jody as an affectionate child who sought connection but was also quite shy. However, she gradually flourished, largely due to the support of a primary school teacher who helped her gain confidence. In 2012, when Jody was 10, Peter married Joanne, who willingly embraced her role as stepmother. Jody and Joanne developed a close bond that Jody treasured. Joanne noted that Jody longing for the maternal connection she missed, and together they worked to nurture that relationship. Jody's home was filled with laughter, thanks to her playful sense of humor. Joanne often referred to her as a wind-up toy because of her boundless energy that brightened their days. Jody's teenage years were largely shaped by her dedication to the Girl Scouts. She poured herself into the program, earning badges, hiking up mountains, and canoeing with her troop. In addition to her scouting achievements, she was a self-taught pianist who effortlessly played the piano. She was also just 3 weeks away from completing her Gold Duke of Edinburgh Award. At Havering's Sixth Form College, where she studied photography, psychology, and sociology, her principal praised her as an excellent, hard-working, and focused student. Jody aspired to work with animals or children and was determined to make a positive impact in the world. Her friends remembered her for her ability to make them laugh. Her sense of humor blossomed when she overcame her childhood shyness. Jody's relationship with her sister Lucy was incredibly strong. Even with 2 years between them, they shared everything: secrets, laughter, and aspirations. Lucy saw Jody as her other half, someone who always prioritized others' needs. Their home in Dagenham was a welcoming place for Jodi's friends, who were drawn to her warmth. She had no enemies and had a special talent for making everyone feel included. Even her dog was part of her life. Jodi enjoyed taking him for walks, which provided a sense of stability amid her busy schedule. On March 1, 2019, Jodi's day began like any other. It was a Friday, and she woke up in her Dagenham home with her dad Peter, stepmom Joanne, and sister Lucy. Jodi was excited not only for the weekend but also for her dad's upcoming birthday. She had been discussing gift ideas with Joanne, eager to find the perfect present to make Peter smile. At 8 a.m., she shared a heartfelt message on Instagram, "Happy birthday, Dad," accompanied by a heart emoji. This post would later deeply affect those who viewed it, gathering many comments following her death. Jodi spent her morning at Havering Sixth Form College, where she was in her second year of A-levels. After her classes ended around 3 p.m., she left college with her backpack over one shoulder, looking forward to the weekend ahead. Back in Dagenham, Jodi had one last thing to do before her evening plans. She took Dog, the family's Yorkshire Terrier, for a walk, a routine that she cherished. By 4:30 p.m., she was back home, catching up with Joanne and Peter, who were preparing to celebrate Peter's birthday. Jodi mentioned that she would be spending time with friends later, which was a typical Friday night for her. Jodi grabbed her jacket, said her goodbyes, and left around 5:30 p.m., promising to return later. She made her way to Romford railway station, a quick bus ride away, to meet her boyfriend, Eddie, and a group of friends. By 6:30 p.m., the group of 6 teens, including Eddie, had gathered and were animatedly discussing their plans for the evening. Their gathering was recorded by surveillance cameras. Romford was their usual hangout, a popular spot for East London teens, filled with shops and fast food restaurants. That night, however, they decided to go to Amy's Park in Harold Hill, about a mile from Havering College, another favorite spot for them. The park featured a playground in the center and benches where teens would gather after dark. By 7:30 p.m., they were settled on a picnic bench, playing music from a portable speaker, just the kind of relaxed night Jodi enjoyed. They had a great time together. At around 9 p.m., Jodi's group spotted 2 figures in the park. They didn't seem unusual since Amy's Park is a public area where people come and go. The 2 stayed for a short time but left without engaging with anyone, disappearing into the night. Jodi and her friends paid them no mind, enjoying their music and conversation. However, at 9:20 p.m., the same 2 figures returned, this time moving with a noticeable intent. According to police reports from the Metropolitan Police, they approached Jodi's group directly, cutting through the darkness. One figure was dressed in dark clothing, and his face was hidden. The other figure was less clear, appearing as a shadow beside him. Without warning, the first attacker stabbed Jodi in the back with such force that the knife broke, causing a severe 7-inch wound that collapsed her lung. Chaos erupted in the park. Eddie's scream shattered the night, and her friends stood frozen in shock. Eddie caught her as she fell, holding her on the ground and desperately calling for help. The 2 attackers quickly disappeared into the darkness. In a panic, Eddie called emergency services, urgency in his voice as he pleaded for an ambulance. Nearby residents were alerted by the screams. A woman began CPR, not realizing that the broken knife was still lodged in Jodi's back. A man in a van stopped to assist, applying his coat to the wound, while another friend to help stop the bleeding. Paramedics arrived within minutes, but Jodi's injuries were severe. Despite their efforts, she was declared dead at 10:26 p.m., just over an hour after the attack. Amy's Park was turned into a crime scene, marked off by police tape as forensic teams searched for evidence. Jodi's friends, still in shock, told the police there was no argument or warning, just a sudden, unprovoked attack. The Metropolitan Police's homicide and major crime team took control of the investigation, with acting Detective Chief Superintendent promising to find those responsible. As the investigation progressed, detectives focused on Jodi's last hours, using witness accounts and phone records to confirm her movements. A key moment in the case came when a local man contacted the police. He reported seeing two men run out of the park on the night of Jody's attack and get into a black Vauxhall Corsa before driving away quickly. The witness also mentioned that there was at least one other person in the car, the driver. CCTV footage played a crucial role in the investigation. The streets of Harold Hill, equipped with various cameras, provided a collection of unclear images. By March 2nd, police had reviewed footage from St. Neots Road and nearby Retford Road, showing two males leaving Amy's Park around 9:25 p.m. One wore a dark jacket with a noticeable pattern, while the other wore a hoodie that covered his face. On March 3rd, the police arrested 20-year-old Manuel Petrovich. The black Vauxhall seen at the crime scene was registered to him. Petrovich denied being involved in Jody's murder, claiming that his car had been stolen during a robbery at knife point. However, he later acknowledged that he owned the Vauxhall and had a mobile phone he used for selling cannabis. He refused to identify anyone he was with that night because he was concerned for his own safety and his family's safety, stating that people had already come to his house looking for him. During further questioning, he described the events of the night Jody died but referred to the attackers as Man A and Man B out of fear. Petrovich explained that on March 1st, he was with a friend who received a call from Man A asking for a ride. They picked up Man A and another person, Man B, and drove to Harold Hill for Man A to collect some cannabis and money. According to him, Man A and Man B got out of the car at Harold Hill, leaving Petrovich and his friend inside. He said the two men were away for about 5 minutes and seemed calm when they returned, noting that there was nothing unusual about their behavior. He stated, "Nothing about them made me suspicious. I did not see either of them carrying anything. My friend and I were told that Man A was collecting money in banned substance." After dropping off the two men, Petrovich claimed that a black male threatened him with a knife and took his car keys. He said that the next day, he heard about a girl who was stabbed in Harold Hill and hoped it wasn't related to his earlier encounter with Man A and Man B. Detectives identified a second suspect, a 19-year-old known to frequent the Harold Hill drug scene, based on witness descriptions of a black male in his late teens. To keep him from knowing he was a suspect, police kept his name confidential, referring to him as Suspect A in initial reports. The investigation continued to grow. A woman in her 40s who lives across the street from Amy's Park reported seeing suspicious individuals coming and going for weeks, especially at night. She also noted a young teenager who resembled Suspect B, suggesting he was running errands for older men. These accounts indicate a possible connection to banned substance activity, as there is a known issue with cannabis in Harold Hill, often involving teens as runners. Detectives believe Jody's group may have been mistaken for rival banned substance dealers. Although Jody has a clean record and no known ties to banned substance, this complicates the investigation. By March 10th, 9 days after Jody's death, the police were making significant progress. Acting on a tip, officers from the Metropolitan Police's Homicide and Major Crime Command focused on a house on Rogers Road in Dagenham, connected to Aaron Isaacs' uncle. They believed Svensson, referred to as Man A, and Isaacs, known as Man B, were hiding there after the attack. At 7 p.m., armed officers surrounded the location, with body cameras recording. In a dramatic turn of events, 19-year-old Svensson Ong-Akwai tried to escape by climbing over a rear flat roof but fell through a conservatory, shattering glass everywhere. A policeman approached and handcuffed him. Svensson's phone had texts linking him to Petrovich and discussing business in Amy's Park. When officers searched his home, they found a jacket that matched one seen in CCTV footage, with traces of Jody's blood on it. Meanwhile, 17-year-old Aaron Isaacs attempted to escape through a window but was caught in the back garden, where he had discarded a rucksack containing a large knife, 2 toothbrushes, and hair mousse, an unusual combination that raised suspicion. The police didn't stop there. They also arrested a 16-year-old boy, a friend of Manuel Petrovich, whose name was withheld for legal reasons, on suspicion of involvement in the crime. The police were casting a wide net, recognizing that Harold Hill's banned substance scene involved numerous runners and dealers. By May, all 4 individuals were facing charges. Svensson and Aaron were charged with murder, while Petrovich and the 16-year-old were charged with murder and manslaughter. Svensson was born on March 29, 2000, grew up in Harold Hill, near Amy's Park. He was raised by his mother and has 4 sisters. His childhood was troubled, primarily due to his father. In 2017, Svensson was kicked out of his home for disrespectful behavior and subsequently lived in a social services hostel in Romford. He described himself as a boxer hoping to become a professional. However, Svensson has criminal convictions for possessing and supplying cannabis and other banned substances. Transporting banned substance between London and rural areas, a risky environment where violence was common. In 2018, he violated a 6-week suspended sentence related to handling stolen jewelry. During the interrogation, Svensson remained calm. He acknowledged being in Amy's Park but insisted he was only there to pick up cannabis. He denied stabbing Jody and instead accused Aaron of being responsible for the attack. Aaron, born on January 27, 2002, faced many challenges from a young age. He lived in a flat with his mother and brother. His childhood as troubled. His mother dealt with mental health issues, and he had been in contact with children's services since he was 4 years old. Aaron's criminal record included offenses such as carrying a screwdriver, causing bodily harm, possessing cannabis, and stealing a vehicle. When he was detained, he was uncooperative, even throwing a rucksack that contained a knife during his arrest. During questioning, he claimed he was simply hanging out with Svensson and insisted he had no knowledge of the knife. He told the detectives that he didn't touch Jody's, blaming Svensson for the attack and saying he ran away out of fear. Manuel Petrovich, the suspected driver, is a 20-year-old local from Romford with connections to banned substance circles. Although not much is known about his background, he was considered a trusted associate of Svensson and frequently lent his car for various operations. In a leaked prison conversation that prosecutors received, Petrovich acknowledged that Svensson had been planning activities in Amy's Park and mentioned that they had set him up a couple of months prior. He stated that he remained in the car and did not learn about the attack's outcome until later. Petrovich denied the murder charges, asserting that he was unaware Jody was the target and had no intention to cause harm. He explained that Jody's group was mistakenly identified as the intended targets, as they were in the same area. They went to confront their rivals but ended up attacking the wrong people, he told a friend, not realizing he was being recorded. Anticipating arrest, Svensson took extreme measures to hide his actions. He burned his clothes after the attack, except for his jacket. Aaron also disposed of his clothes, and both men fled to Dagenham in an attempt to escape the police. During their interrogations, they played a blame game, each pointing fingers at the other. Svensson claimed he was only a lookout, while Aaron argued he wasn't involved in the plan. However, the evidence against them grew: the blood-stained jacket, phone records indicating they had conspired together, and CCTV footage showing them at the crime scene. As the formal charges were laid out, the community in Harold Hill struggled to understand the senseless motives behind the crime. Jody, a Girl Scout who had no ties to banned substance, became an unwitting victim in a conflict she was unaware of. While the arrests brought some relief, they did not provide closure. Jody's family, especially her father Peter, wanted justice. Peter established the Jody Chesney Foundation, a charity aimed at diverting young people from knife crime. The foundation's website described Jody as a kind person who accepted everyone. Purple ribbons emerged as symbols of her memory, with vigils and scouting events celebrating her compassion. Jody's legacy reached beyond Harold Hill, igniting national discussions about knife crime. The foundation supported youth programs, and Peter advocated for stricter laws, although he told that no law will bring her back. The trial began on September 17, 2019, at the Old Bailey, one of London's most historic courts. 4 defendants stood accused: Svensson Onakwi, 19, Aaron Isaacs, 17, Manuel Petrovich, 20, and a 16-year-old boy, unnamed for legal reasons. The courtroom was heavy with emotion. Jody's family, including her dad, Peter, stepmom, Joanne, and sister, Lucy, attended nearly every day, wearing purple ribbons in her memory. The prosecutor asserting that all 4 defendants played a role in a brutal act of unprovoked violence linked to a turf war. He explained to the jurors that Jody was completely innocent and had been mistakenly identified as a rival by the assailants who normally visited Amy's park. He emphasized damaging evidence, including CCTV footage showing Petrovich's black Vauxhall Corsa near the park, a blood-stained jacket belonging to Svensson, and phone records that connected the group to a premeditated attack. He also referenced a conversation in prison where Petrovich admitted that Svensson intended to target rivals but ended up attacking the wrong people. The prosecutor claimed that Svensson was the person who stabbed Jody, with Aaron enthusiastically supporting him, while Petrovich and the 16-year-old boy assisted in the attack. This was not a spontaneous act, the prosecutor told, highlighting that the group intended to inflict serious harm, making them all responsible for murder under joint enterprise law. The defense teams actively sought to clear their clients of wrongdoing. Charles Sherrard, who represented Svensson, acknowledged that his client was present in the park but denied that he was the one who stabbed Jody. Sherrard pointed to Aaron as the real attacker and argued that Svensson's clothing, a white hoodie and gray tracksuit, did not match the description of a figure dressed in black provided by witnesses. Sarah Forshaw, who defended Petrovich, claimed her client was only a driver and unaware of any violent plans. If Petrovich had known what was going to happen, he would have turned off his phone like Svensson did, she asserted to the jurors. Natasha Wong, representing Aaron, contended that he was merely a runner without any intent to commit violence, denying that he carried a knife or was aware of Svensson's plans. Louise Sweet, who defended the 16-year-old, emphasized his lack of a violent history and urged jurors to view him as a bystander rather than an active participant. Each defense relied on the absence of direct evidence, such as DNA on the knife, in hopes of creating reasonable doubt. After 45 hours of testimony, which included Eddie Coyle's description of the attack and forensic evidence of an 18 centimeters deep wound, the jury deliberated for just over 5 hours. On November 7, 2019, they reached their decision. Svensson Ongakwai and Aaron Isaacs were found guilty of murder, while Manuel Petrovich and the 16-year-old were acquitted of all charges. Sentencing took place on November 18, where Judge Wendy Joseph condemned the pathetic location dispute that resulted in Jody's death. Svensson Ongakwai, identified as the one who stabbed Jody, received a life sentence with a minimum of 26 years, while Aaron Isaacs, his accomplice, received life with a minimum of 18 years. The courtroom was emotional as impact statements were read. While the verdict offered bittersweet relief to Jody's family, Peter, speaking outside the court, stated he was over the moon about the convictions but heartbroken over his loss. Jody's sister Lucy wrote in her statement, she was only 20 years old, and already she dreaded her life. Joanne believed that Petrovich, as the driver, should have faced consequences, but the family chose to focus on preserving Jody's memory. The Jody Chesney Foundation is actively working to make a difference. They hosted a fundraiser in 2024 that raised £10,000 for workshops aimed at preventing knife crime, as reported on their website. Jody Chesney's life, vibrant and full of promise, was tragically cut short on March 1, 2019, in a senseless act of violence that shook Harold Hill. The convictions of Svensson Ongakwai and Aaron Isaacs brought a measure of justice, but no verdict could heal the void left in the hearts of her family and community. Through the Jody Chesney Foundation, her father Peter channels grief into action, raising funds to combat knife crime. Purple ribbons, Jody's favorite color, continue to symbolize her compassion and the collective resolve to honor her memory. Her legacy endures, inspiring a national call to end the scourge of knife crime and ensure no other family endures such loss. Though Jody is gone, her light shines on in every step taken to make communities safer. On the evening of September 10, 2012, a small village in France was quiet, but something life-changing was about to unfold inside one home. Jacqueline Savage had lived in fear for nearly 50 years, trapped in a cycle of violence that seemed impossible to escape. That night, everything reached a breaking point. Her husband, Norbert Moreau, was sitting on the terrace, drinking whiskey as he had all day. Moments before, the house had been filled with his shouting, threats, and the sound of another strike. Jacqueline had experienced this too many times before, but this time was different. Instead of waiting for the chaos to end, She walked to the cabinet, retrieved a hunting rifle, and loaded it. She stepped onto the terrace, took a deep breath, and did something she never thought she would. A gunshot echoed. How everything led up to this moment and what would unfold next was just beginning. Jacqueline Sauvage was born on December 27, 1947, in Montargis, France. Little is known about her early life, except that her mother was a victim of domestic violence. She grew up in a large family, with 5 brothers and 2 sisters. At just 16, Jacqueline met Norbert, a charming young man who was only a month older than her. His charm made him popular with women, but he chose Jacqueline. Their youthful romance quickly turned into a passionate love affair. Jacqueline's relationship changed dramatically when she became pregnant at 17. On June 5, 1965, she decided to marry Norbert, despite her mother's strong objections and her siblings' unanimous disapproval, who thought she was making a big mistake. Jacqueline was in love and, like many young women, dreamed of having a home and family. Their first daughter was born in 1966, followed by a second daughter while Norbert was away from home completing his military service. During this time, Jacqueline trained as a seamstress. 4 years later, they built their dream home in a beautiful village 80 kilometers south of Paris. The house, made of wood and stone, had a large garden and terrace, making it an ideal place to start a new chapter in their lives. It was here that they welcomed their 3rd and 4th children. As the years went by, Norbert's work life declined significantly. In 1981, he was let go due to professional misconduct. Struggling financially, he and Jacqueline started their own independent transport business. Jacqueline took care of the administration and deliveries. By 1989, their 2 children joined the family business, which had grown to include wine sales. Over the years, Jacqueline managed to secure her retirement benefits but continued to work. As their children became adults, they went their separate ways, except for only son, who remained single. By the time Jacqueline turned 65, she had 11 grandchildren. She still lived with Norbert in their home and was actively involved in a local hunting association. Though they seemed like a loving, close family on the outside, there was a troubling and tragic reality beneath the surface, one that would soon take the world by surprise. On the evening of September 10, 2012, around 7:30 p.m., Jacqueline took a hunting rifle from the cabinet. She went to the basement to fetch the cartridges and then went out onto the terrace where Norbert was sitting with a glass of whiskey. Without any hesitation, she attacked him 3 times in the back. Afterward, Jacqueline called emergency services calmly. By the time they arrived, Norbert was dead. The incident occurred the day after Jacqueline's son took his own life. Jacqueline claimed that Mr. Moreau had physically and abused his wife, daughter, and son. She stated that she acted out of fear for her own life and her children's safety. That morning, Norbert had made new threats, vowing to carry them out. Jacqueline claimed that the attacking was the end of 47 years of constant domestic abuse, which had not only ruined her life but had also left lasting wounds on their children. During her initial court appearance, Jacqueline described how she first recognized Norbert's true character, characterized by violent outbursts. The first time he hit her was after a dinner party at a friend's house, where she had received compliments about her appearance. Out of nowhere, he struck her hard across the face, leaving her shocked and speechless. As time went on, the physical violence, abuse, and verbal attacks became part of her everyday life. Their children were all affected, with her son bearing the brunt of his father's psychological cruelty. Norbert would belittle, humiliate, and break him down mentally. The daughters suffered even more. 2 of them were subjected to their father's abuse. Whenever Norbert lost his temper, he would lash out indiscriminately. The girls learned to stay silent, endure the pain, and hope it would end quickly. The violence started with slaps and gradually intensified to cruel insults, severe beatings, and acts of humiliation. At one point, he struck Jacqueline with a motorcycle helmet, leaving her with a permanent scar on her forehead. For nearly 50 years, Jacqueline lived in suffering. In her testimony, Jacqueline initially excused Norbert's behavior, attributing it to his tough childhood. She hoped they would eventually become a normal, loving family. But as time went on, the violence became commonplace, and fear of retaliation kept her silent. Their daughter, Fabienne, tried to break this silence. As a teenager, she ran away and reported to the police that her father had abused her. However, instead of taking action, the police officer merely warned Norbert. Fearing the repercussions, Fabienne felt compelled to withdraw her statement, leaving her father unpunished. This enraged him even more. Jacqueline, meanwhile, was terrified of what would happen to her and her children if she left, especially since she had no financial independence. All their bank accounts were in Norbert's name. She felt trapped and reflected, what would she have done with 4 children? She stayed to protect them. Jacqueline felt trapped in her situation. Norbert controlled not only their home but also isolated her from her family. Her parents and siblings had distanced themselves, refusing to intervene, and she had lost all her friends. The only people she interacted with were those in Norbert's tightly knit circle. There was a dark time when she considered ending her life. Most days, she just endured the abuse, waiting for it to stop. However, the night she killed Norbert was different. She noticed something unsettling in his eyes and a menacing tone in his voice that deeply scared her. In that moment, she could vividly imagine her children lying lifeless in front of her, same her son had been. On that day, he stormed into the bedroom, slammed the door, and threatened her, saying, "This time, he'll finish she off." Then he forcefully grabbed her, dragging her through the kitchen, into the hallway. He physically assaulted her and yelled that he would kill her children, whom he called the brats, and that he would also kill her. In that moment, something inside her broke. Earlier that day, they had argued about business. Norbert had started drinking around 11 a.m. and became increasingly irritable as the day went on. At one point, Jacqueline had locked herself in the bedroom to rest, taking some sedatives. By 7:30 p.m., he burst into the room, slapped her hard across the face, and insulted her, calling her lazy and demanding that she prepare dinner. After that, he poured himself another drink. He sat outside on the terrace, vowing to eliminate them all. Jacqueline remembered standing there, tasting the blood from her lip after his latest attack. She closed her eyes and pulled the trigger. The preliminary investigation revealed an injury on her lip, but no other significant signs of violence on her body. No sedatives were found in her system. Her trial occurred nearly 2 years later, on October 23, 2014, and gained national attention, sparking discussions about domestic violence and self-defense laws in France. In court, Jacqueline pleaded not guilty, and her defense claimed she acted to protect herself. She detailed years of brutal beatings, humiliation, and abuse from her husband. The judge persistently questioned her about why she never reported the abuse to the authorities. Jacqueline explained that she remained silent to survive. She understood that revealing the truth would lead to unbearable consequences. She shared her feelings of fear, shame, and the constant control Norbert had over her life. She recalled how she had often waited for his angry outbursts to subside, for her injuries to heal, and for the day she could finally escape. Finally, her son's death became unbearable for her. Journalists at the trial noted that she seemed distant and withdrawn, often going silent when the court questioned her. Jacqueline stated that they feared Norbert, and despite some complaints from his victims, nothing ever changed. Her 3 daughters also testified in court. The youngest, who experienced both physical and emotional abuse since she was 16, described her father as a monster. They all confirmed that Norbert had a volatile relationship with their brother, often resulting in physical fights. Their testimonies were crucial in revealing the ongoing cycle of abuse in their family and the desperation that led their mother to take action. Neighbors who testified described Norbert as a violent and intimidating individual. One woman candidly expressed her relief at his death, stating that Jacqueline had done them all a favor. A longtime friend of the couple characterized Norbert as impulsive and aggressive, frequently erupting in anger. After a challenging 5-day trial, Jacqueline's lawyers, who specialize in domestic abuse cases, argued for a broad interpretation of self-defense. They sought her complete exoneration, highlighting that she had suffered psychological and physical abuse for long time. They argued that she was well aware of Norbert's capacity to follow through on his threats. In contrast, The prosecution maintained that this was not a genuine case of self-defense, pointing out that Norbert had been shot in the back and that several minutes had elapsed since his last attack. They sought a 14-year prison sentence. On October 28, 2014, Jacqueline was convicted and sentenced to 10 years in prison. The judges criticized her for not showing remorse, arguing that she portrayed herself as a victim instead of expressing regret. They referenced French law, which states that self-defense must be an immediate and proportional response to an unjust attack. The verdict led to widespread outrage throughout France, with thousands protesting in support of Jacqueline. Demonstrators condemned the court for not understanding the realities of domestic violence and coercive control. Following the trial, Jacqueline unintentionally became a symbol in the fight against gender-based violence. Her case sparked a national discussion about the prolonged suffering of victims in abusive relationships. A support committee was quickly established, gaining backing from the mayor of Paris, environmental activists, and left-wing politicians. Some women held a dramatic protest outside the prison where Jacqueline was incarcerated, they wearing flower crowns while they began symbolically digging a tunnel, as if trying to free her. Jacqueline's lawyers worked hard to secure her early release. The strong public support greatly encouraged her. Despite suffering from bronchitis and chronic back pain, she was touched to see the first protest in her honor. In August 2015, a local court in Melun denied her request for parole, claiming she had not expressed enough remorse. However, due to continued public pressure, a second hearing was held on December 3, 2015. Her daughters campaigned vigorously for her freedom, emphasizing that she had endured a lifetime of mistreatment and did not deserve to spend her final years in prison. Nonetheless, the Paris Court of Appeals upheld the original sentence. Their only remaining option was to seek a reduction of her sentence. Public outrage over Jacqueline's conviction was so strong that it caught the president's attention. On December 22, 2016, Jacqueline's daughters arranged a meeting with the then-president to ask for his help in securing a pardon for their mother. Just 2 days later, he granted a partial pardon using a rarely invoked constitutional power. He urged the courts to impose the minimum sentence possible, which resulted in a reduction of her prison term by 2 years and 4 months. A petition launched on Change to ask the French president to pardon Ms. Savage gathered 435,971 signatures. On February 26, 2017, a French television program called September à Huit received an extremely high viewership of 5 million people due to a segment describing Jacqueline Savage. In addition, politicians spoke out in support of Ms. Savage, forming a support committee, including Anne Hidalgo and Jean-Luc Mélenchon. After the presidential pardon was announced, a major debate broke out among lawyers and criminal law experts about whether the rule of law was respected. Their view was that the media had overturned 2 consecutive court decisions by influencing the public, who then pushed for the presidential pardon. Jacqueline's newfound freedom lasted exactly 4 years. She passed away in her home on July 23, 2020, at the age of 72, after being diagnosed with a terminal illness. To this day, she remains a significant figure in France's history, remembered as both a victim of extreme domestic abuse and a catalyst for change in the country's legal system. In Michigan, there is a small town called Traverse City, with a population of about 15,000. It is famous for the picturesque Lake Michigan, on the shores of which several resorts can be found. In the summer, a large number of tourists are attracted by festivals and water sports events. They come to swim, ride boats, enjoy delicious local food, and appreciate the unique landscapes around Lakes Michigan. In the winter, the area is snowy and quiet, there are few tourists, and life flows very slowly. It was in such a place that 18-year-old Kaylee Bruce lived and worked. She was always a cheerful and bright person. In addition, she was very smart, attractive, and determined. By the 1990s, she was considering pursuing an education. Thanks to her academic success in high school, she managed to gain admission to Northwestern Michigan College without any problems. The educational institution was located in Traverse City. To support herself away from her parents, Kaylee worked as receptionist of a local beach condominium company that rented out apartments, rooms, and houses to visitors. The condominium was situated right on the lake and was very popular during the tourist season. On the evening of Monday, February 16, 1998, Kaylee worked at beach condominiums from 5 p.m. to 8 p.m. In February, there were virtually no tourists, only a few locals, so she was almost alone in the building. The night before, while talking to her friend Kim, who also worked at the condominium, she had expressed her eagerness for the start of the season, hoping for more guests and an increase in her salary. That same day, with a little over an hour left before the end of her shift, Kaylee had to do some light cleaning, put everything in the utility room, and then go home. That evening, Kim was not on shift but was passing by the beach condominiums at about 7:30 p.m. She had been driving her friends home after they had spent time together at a restaurant. As Kim drove past beach condominium, she looked toward the office through the window and noticed a light in the area of the administration desk, where Kaylee was preparing to close up. Kim wanted to quickly drop off her friends and then stop by to see Kaylee. However, when Kim returned about 40 minutes later, she saw that the light inside was off and Kaylee was nowhere to be found. Thinking she was late and that her friend had already left. Satisfied that her friend had gone home, she turned around and left. The next morning, on Tuesday, February 17, 1998, at about 7 a.m., the first person to arrive at the beach condominium's office was an air conditioning technician named Zachary Medden. He immediately noticed that the door was unlocked. Although this did not cause him alarm, he calmly walked inside and called out Kaylee's name. Receiving no answer, he saw that no one was at the reception desk where Kaylee should have already been preparing for her workday. She was never late and usually arrived early. All the lights were off, and Zachary walked around the floor. He noticed a glimmer through the crack of a door and decided to investigate further. When he got closer, he saw suspicious red stains near the threshold. It was unclear what it was, but when he opened the door, he realized the horrendous nature of the scene. In horror, Zachary ran away and immediately called emergency services at 911. When the police arrived, Zachary could barely speak, looking emotionally traumatized and barely holding back tears as he described the situation. The scene found in the utility room was soon deemed one of the most horrifying crime scenes in local law enforcement history. In the small room, where household appliances and cleaning supplies were stored, there was blood everywhere, on the walls, even the ceiling. In the middle of the room was the mutilated body of a girl. The victim was Kaylee Bruce, the 18-year-old employee. Next to her body lay all the broken pieces, with shards of plastic and metal covered in dried blood, as well as particles of scalp and hair. Kaylee was found naked, with one of the power cords from an iron wound tightly around her neck, cutting into her skin and crushing her larynx. According to the medical examiner's report, the victim had 19 deep lacerations that cut down to the bone. Her skull was crushed from numerous blows, fractures of the vault and facial bones were found. Severe injuries to her neck and throat were consistent with strangulation, indicating she had been beaten for an extended period with blunt objects on her body, abdomen, chest, and pelvis, leading to numerous internal bleeding. The most horrific detail discovered was a metal pin inserted into her perineum with such force that it damaged the tissues up to the pelvic bone, penetrating several centimeters into it. According to forensic experts, Kaylee remained alive for some time after sustaining this injury until she eventually bled out. Her death was undoubtedly a painful one. The entire small utility room was covered with her blood, and it was smeared over her body as if she had fought back. Despite the small size of the room, it took forensic experts 6 hours to collect dozens of pieces of evidence. They discovered numerous defensive injuries, indicating a brutal struggle, along with signs of disorder around the area. Apparently, Kaylee's resistance only angered her attacker. Footprints and similar traces were found strewn on the floor, suggesting that the attacker had jumped on Kaylee in an attempt to cover this terrible incident. Local reports described the scene, and the first thing that struck the arriving journalist was the amount of blood. He immediately realized they were dealing with one of the most terrible crimes in the town's history. Despite years of experience reporting from dozens of bloody crime scenes, he had never seen such cruelty before. He labeled the criminal a real monster and couldn't comprehend what could drive someone to commit such an atrocity against an innocent 18-year-old girl. Kaylee Bruce died at about 8 p.m. the previous day. It is possible that when Kim was standing outside the office, her friend was already beyond help. She herself miraculously avoided a collision with the killer. Kaylee's family was shocked by such a brutal murder and could not understand who could wish harm to such a sweet girl. Relatives, friends, and acquaintances told detectives that Kaylee was a very nice and kind person. No one had ever heard anyone speak badly of her. It was hard to imagine that someone would have a motive to attack her. Some items were missing from the crime scene, but nothing significant, so the theory of a robbery gone wrong was not considered. Detectives suspected that the perpetrator must have known Kaylee personally, given the brutal nature of the attack. Revenge, hatred, or jealousy seemed likely motives. The attacker was probably observing her and knew her daily routine, allowing him to choose the moment when Kaylee would be most vulnerable. He likely knew when to strike so that no one would be nearby, and she might have trusted him. They decided to search for the criminal among Kaylee's immediate acquaintances and among local residents who might have been in regular contact with her, possibly even living nearby. Unfortunately, there were no CCTV cameras on the premises of the resort or even inside the office, which left them without clues. All the blood at the crime scene was analyzed and confirmed to belong to the victim, but no fingerprints could be found. It was clear that the perpetrator had some criminal experience. He was probably wearing gloves or had carefully erased all traces of his presence. The forensic team collected more than 100 pieces of evidence from the small utility room. The only trace left by the aggressor were boot prints found on the body and the bloody floor. Forensic experts used a special substance that allowed them to obtain a clearer pattern of the shoe's sole along with all the small details. When the police received a full footprint, they assessed the killer's size. He had to be a tall, strong man who wore large shoes. The print had a clear tread, resembled work shoes. Detectives visited local stores to find a similar pair and discovered that the prints matched shoes from a brand called Pajar. When combined with the prints found on Kaylee's body, they turned out to be identical, leading to a person who likely used specific clothing. The young man who worked in the condominium quickly attracted the authorities' attention, Zachary Medden, who discovered the body and reported it to the police. Detectives were alarmed that he had gone to the police to report finding the body. This was a tactic sometimes used by murderers hoping to remove suspicion from themselves and gather information about the progress of the investigation. Zachary was taken to the station for an official interrogation to verify and exclude him from the list of suspects. He was still visibly shaken by what he had seen, struggling to control himself, and appeared sincere. Zachary voluntarily allowed his car to be searched. The investigation had reached a dead end, with no valuable information emerging and all suspects cleared. The excitement in a local community was reaching its peak. It became almost impossible to buy a regular pepper spray for self-defense, as supplies were quickly depleted. The main customers were schoolgirls and female students, afraid to walk alone or go out at night. One of the detectives arrived at the college dormitory where Kaylee studied, and witnesses reported several suspicious young people who had already checked in there. They needed to be checked. In the end, it turned out that they were not involved. The detectives spoke to their friend Kim, who knew Kaylee better than anyone else in the city. She said that shortly before the murder, Kaylee had broken up with her boyfriend, whose name was Dylan. They broke up and started dating again. As far as Kim knew, they had broken up again, but Dylan desperately tried to renew contact with Kaylee. He was obsessively persistent, even manipulative. They talked to him just 2 days after the murder. Dylan worked with heating, air conditioning equipment and serviced the units. They immediately noticed that he had boots of the brand Pilar, similar in size to the footprints found at the crime scene. Dylan had several pairs of the same brand, which were immediately sent to the laboratory for examination. However, no traces of blood could be found on them. Of course, he could have had other similar boots that he got rid of after the attack, but no matter how hard the police tried, they could not find any evidence against Dylan. Additionally, he had a reliable alibi, so he was excluded from the list of suspects. The killer could now be tens or even hundreds of kilometers away from the condominium, but the degree of cruelty suggested great hatred or sadistic inclinations. They were looking for all criminals prone to attacking women who had recently been released from prison and lived in the area. However, all efforts were in vain. During the inspection of the hill, a small metal rod was found. It was a part of a car tire valve. On it, they found Kaylee's blood and several hairs that did not belong to her. One of them had an entire follicle, which allowed them to create a DNA profile of the probable criminal. Hopes for this were still low as the technology at the time was not yet perfect. In any case, this version needed to be checked, and that took time. They decided to use all the meager materials available to them. They organized a press conference and appealed to the public. The key moment on which they focused was the problem of numerous false statements. People contacted the police station, and all leads were checked. One person who contacted them was a local resident who worked as a presenter at a radio station. His name was John Chandler. He immediately noted that his information could help find the criminal. On February 26, 1998, 10 days after the murder of Kaylee and following the press conference, John went to change the tires on his car. Near the resort area, there was an industrial park and a tire factory that he visited. While in the waiting room, he accidentally overheard the manager talking to the rest of the staff, trying to find one of the workers. The employees were discussing that a technician had not shown up for work and had not been seen for several days. They had all seen the press conference, so they suspected something was wrong. There were rumors that the missing man had a very bad character. One colleague mentioned that a day after the murder of Kaylee, he had seen this technician wearing boots of the brand Pajar, which had suspicious dark spots. A day later, he bought himself new shoes and did not wear that pair again. After hearing all of this, John immediately called the police station to request that they check this tip. He felt that this information was very important, and the detectives were convinced of its significance. They went to the tire factory. The manager immediately admitted that John's words were true. Colleagues that morning had discussed one of the employees of the organization, who turned out to be 25-year-old Kevin Holzer, the son of the director of the company. Several employees confirmed that he always wore large-sized Pajar boots while on shift. A few days after the murder, he had a new pair. After examining the area where Kevin usually worked, detectives noticed that small metal rods from tire valves were lying around on the floor. They looked very similar to the evidence from the crime scene. Local workers confirmed that these rods often flew off when changing tires. Now the police were sure that John's statement was leading them in the right direction. Their suspicions only grew stronger when they found out that Kevin had been renting a room in beach condominiums where Kaylee worked for 6 months. He had the opportunity to observe her, calculate her daily routine, and choose the right time when she would be alone. In fact, Kevin spoke with investigators as early as 8 a.m. on February 17, when Kaylee's body was found. He was the only one who did not ask what had happened, which seemed strange. Kevin claimed he had quickly gone to work at the plant. Due to the lengthy process of examining the crime scene and collecting evidence, the detectives did not have the necessary clues when they spoke to Kevin. It became apparent that the criminal could have been in their hands from the very first minutes of the investigation, but he managed to slip away. The new main suspect was now wearing Pajar boots of the same size. It was decided to reanalyze the collected data and follow up on everything the local residents had said. The detectives spoke to one resident of beach condominiums. She said that, day of the attack, she returned home from work in the evening at about 10 p.m. The door was open, although she perfectly remembered locking it. It turned out that the master key had disappeared from the reception desk. Suspicions against Kevin were confirmed by Kaylee's friend Kim, who said that he often ran into the office and lingered at the reception desk while Kaylee worked there. Kim believed that Kaylee liked Kevin, so he tried to spend any free minute chatting, even on far-fetched topics. He constantly asked to be let into his apartment with spare keys, which only the condominium administrator had access to. He claimed that he had forgotten or lost his own key. It seemed he was just looking for a reason to get closer to Kaylee. Kevin was tall, athletic, practiced martial arts. He looked like a likely killer, but they failed to find him. He simply ran away. In search of additional information, they went to the tire factory where he worked and checked the guy's biography. They managed to find out that Kevin had problems with the police 5 years before the murder. He had been accused of abuse. In the late hours, Christina was returning home from a bar when a stranger grabbed her and dragged her into an alley, then began to beat her. She sustained very serious injuries and was sure that she was saved by a miracle. Realizing that the criminal wouldn't stop, Christina pretended to be dead and offered no resistance. As soon as she stopped moving, the criminal simply lost interest and left. Apparently, the attacker enjoyed beating and killing women, which was very disturbing. The potential serial killer could be anywhere, and now no one was safe. Trying to understand the moment when Kevin escaped, they realized that he had disappeared from all radar as soon as the press conference was over, which announced the size, brand of the shoes and the tread pattern he had worn before. In order to scare off the probable killer, the police obtained an arrest warrant and went to his apartment, but nothing valuable for their investigation could be found. There were no bloody shoes or clothing, and they even checked the drains in the bathroom, but found no traces of blood. This puzzled the detectives. Around the same time, a friend named Mike contacted the police station. He was very worried and said that he might know where to look for Kaylee's killer. Just before this, he and his friend, Kevin, had spent Friday night at a club. They were drinking and chatting after a new press conference had been held. Detectives got a warrant for Kevin's arrest. During the party, Mike's phone rang. On the other end was another friend who asked where Kevin was, that the main suspect in the murder who was sitting across from Mike. Kevin became noticeably nervous, but Mike managed to say that his girlfriend had called and asked him to come home. Kevin did not suspect anything and said it was time for him to go. Mike walked Kevin to the parking lot, where they said goodbye and went their separate ways. As soon as Kevin disappeared from sight, Mike immediately called the police station, providing a description of Kevin's car and clothing. Mike had said he was heading south but gave no exact directions. Kevin was driving a noticeably gold-colored car, which was quickly tracked down. Detectives arrived at the parking lot, but the car was abandoned, and Kevin was not there. It seemed he had managed to escape punishment again. The police spoke to the guard, who admitted that he had talked with Kevin for a long time before Kevin fled. He reportedly headed to Indiana and planned to use the train. The detectives were following Kevin closely, but he was slightly ahead. During this same period, testing of hair found on the metal part of Kaylee's body was completed. The blood from this small piece belonged to Kaylee Bruce, while the hair was male. Samples were taken from Kevin's apartment, allowing for a comparison of the criminal's DNA profile, which matched completely. They feared that he, like a cornered animal, could start killing again, but they managed to intercept and arrest him. Earlier, during his transfer to Chicago, he had refused to cooperate with the investigation and immediately demanded a lawyer. However, the evidence against him was irrefutable, and the prosecutor considered the trial a mere formality. Detectives discovered that Kevin had moved into the beach condominiums just 6 months before the murder. They suspected that he had not chosen his victim randomly. They believed he probably liked Kaylee and became obsessed with her, eventually stalking her. When he found out that Kaylee would be working and studying in the city, he decided to get as close to her as possible. Naturally, all this could not end well. On June 21, 1999, Kevin Holzer's trial began. He was charged with the murder of Kaylee Bruce. Despite his father's wealth and a smart defense attorney, it seemed even the attorney considered his client guilty and did not even attempt to acquit him. In October 1999, the jury decided that Kevin Holzer was guilty of first-degree murder, and he received a life sentence without the possibility of parole. In the years since before Kevin was convicted of abuse, there may have been more attacks. Their suspicion was investigated, but it was not possible to confirm these assumptions. Everyone in his circle was in danger. In which, the witness finds her apartment door open when she comes home from work. She is shocked by the lucky coincidence that she was missed by Kevin Holzer. The police believed this was not an accident. He had stolen the master key and used someone else's apartment because he knew that no one would be there for quite a long time. After the massacre, he entered someone else's territory to take a shower and wash away the traces of the attack. Kevin actually had no feelings for Kaylee except cruelty, Any girl could have been in her place. He intentionally found excuses to approach her, chat with her, and ask for her keys because he wanted to learn how to get them. He carefully calculated Kaylee's schedule as soon as she first talked to him. The lives of Traverse City residents were divided into before and after the murder of Kaylee Bruce. This massacre was so cruel and senseless that the crime is still imprinted in the memory of many townspeople. Jessica Edens was born on January 22, 1981, in a small suburb of New York State, USA. She came from a large family, with a sister named Diane and two half-brothers, Nathan and Adam. Jessica spent her early years surrounded by loving parents and siblings, with whom she developed warm relationships. She didn't have outstanding academic success but was always creative, dreaming of becoming a photographer. When her parents recognized this passion, they bought her an amateur camera, which she carried everywhere. She took pictures of people, nature, cities, and architecture, anything that caught her attention. Her work was admired and praised. During her teenage years, Jessica actively pursued this passion and mastered the craft. She began to shoot weddings and various events, initially for free, then for a small fee. This allowed her to earn enough money for her own needs, and the idea of building a real business became increasingly appealing. Jessica's personal life was also progressing. She was sociable, active, attractive, and always attracted a lot of attention. On November 19, 2007, she gave birth to a son named Hayden King. Jessica became pregnant during a rapidly developing relationship with a young man, but the love between them faded quickly, and they broke up before Hayden was born. However, Jessica remained optimistic and maintained friendly relations with the child's biological father, allowing him to communicate with Hayden. Jessica was determined to provide everything her child needed, regardless of whether she had a partner or was raising him as a single mother. Fortunately, she did not have to be alone for long. In 2008, Jessica met a man named Benjamin Edens. They quickly found common ground, grew closer, and within a few meetings, they could not imagine their lives without each other. They was in no hurry to officially register their marriage, as both were creative individuals who understood each other well. After a few months, they moved in together, and Jessica began to contemplate having more children. After a while, they officially got married in 2010. Shortly thereafter, they decided to move to a new large house located in a small, cozy town in Uneasy, South Carolina, which was ideal for a quiet family life. Their family relationships flourished, and Jessica was convinced she had found the man of her dreams, a feeling that was mutual. 2 years later, on July 19, 2012, they welcomed a daughter named Harper Edens. Jessica believes this further strengthens her relationship with Benjamin. He was a wonderful father who spent all his free time with Harper. He also became so close to Hayden that the boy did not suspect Benjamin was not his biological father. By 2017, Hayden was in the 4th grade, while his younger sister Harper was about to start 1st grade in the fall. This was an exciting milestone. From the outside, Jessica's family appeared perfect. She had 2 children, a beloved job, and a husband whom she described to everyone as the best person. Her eldest child was a good student, and the family expected the same from Harper. Jessica's passion for photography thrived, but when she had her daughter, she decided to take a break and become a housewife, stepping back from her small but successful photo business. However, as Harper grew more independent, Jessica returned to attending various events to conduct professional photography. To simplify her client search, she created a website where she introduced herself as a photographer from Greenville. Jessica described her life as perfect, but, as often happens, things were exaggerated. Behind the facade of love and understanding, difficulties began to arise in the marriage. Over time, Benjamin's feelings cooled, and tension accumulated between them. Jessica wanted to understand what was happening as she began to notice uncharacteristic behaviors in her husband. He would come home from work, immediately run into the shower without even saying hello to his wife and children, as if he were trying to hide something. More and more often, he stayed at work much longer than his shift lasted, citing overtime and global projects that no one could confirm. He began to actively engage in sports, carefully monitored his appearance, and switched to healthy eating. All this could look like ordinary healthy habits that people develop with age, but not with Jessica. She began to suspect Benjamin of cheating. Quickly, a suitable candidate for an affair appeared. A young, attractive woman had recently started at her husband's workplace. This woman's name was Meredith Rahm. She was born on October 29, 1988, in Collierville, Tennessee. In Jessica's opinion, it was on Meredith that her husband had set his eyes. In the early years of Meredith's life, her parents divorced, and her mother quickly found a new man and remarried, so Meredith had a stepfather named Carlton Chambers. He was a worthy person and became like a second father to her. The family in which she grew up was friendly and loving. Meredith had a younger sister named Brittany Rowell. She dedicated herself to her studies from an early age and was focused on career success. She studied well and was creative, like Jessica, but family and children were of little interest to her. In 2009, she graduated from the University of Memphis with a bachelor's degree in international business. After gaining some necessary experience, she moved to Greenville. Meredith was very independent and self-confident, which immediately caught Benjamin's eye. By the time they met, Meredith had started working at the same company as Benjamin. In fact, Jessica's suspicions were justified. Immediately after meeting Meredith, her husband became attracted to her. Their feelings come from both sides. They started dating in secret, and their affair continued for a year. Now, Benjamin finally realized that he wanted to be with his young mistress and wanted to break up with Jessica, but he didn't know how to approach the issue. He was afraid of offending his wife and wanted to avoid the difficulties of the divorce process. For a long time, Benjamin was torn between his family and his mistress. His wife's suspicions only aggravated the situation. The more accusations she made, the more inevitable the breakup felt, which provoked constant quarrels. Jessica did not trust her husband and wanted to find out what was going on. He tried to distance himself, but this could not go on forever. It was time to tell the truth, but Benjamin could not bring himself to do it. Instead of confessing, he decided to move out on far-fetched grounds, citing constant pressure from his wife. On April 11, 2017, Benjamin packed his things and moved from the shared family home to a rented apartment. At least that is what he initially told his wife. Jessica kept hoping that these were only temporary difficulties that many people experience, and that their marriage would be saved. She believed she could convince her husband to return to her and their children. Benjamin tried to avoid the topic of separation altogether, reluctantly answered calls and messages, which only offended her more. The betrayal was of such a magnitude that she could not forgive it. She was angry, and her hopes for a family reunion were shattered. But most of all, she was furious that Benjamin simply ignored her. As the persecution began, Jessica spread various damaging facts about Meredith on all social networks and on any sites where she could post information, exposing her as the homewrecker and her husband as a cheater. Jessica continued to communicate regularly with Benjamin, trying to win him back. Instead, he finally decided to file for divorce. Telling Jessica this provoked even more anger from her, and she now decided to annoy him as much as possible. She knew how much Benjamin loved their daughter Harper, so she sought sole custody of the girl. He had always been a caring father and loved the children, including Hayden. Therefore, he was against such a decision. Benjamin wanted to maintain the right to communicate with the children. He did not want to sit idly by. He hoped to smooth over the conflict and therefore proposed joint custody. Jessica was adamant. Against this backdrop, a serious custody battle began, and tensions escalated. Realizing that it would not be possible to agree amicably, Benjamin went to court on July 11th. He wanted to gain an advantage and testified under oath that Jessica was using the children as a weapon of revenge. By this point, Jessica had completely prevented meetings and communication between the children with their father, not even allowing contact through social networks and mobile phones. Everything was under her total control. Benjamin was afraid she could go too far. Simultaneously, Jessica intensified her harassment of Benjamin and Meredith. She continued to post not just hateful words toward Meredith on social media but also used graphic photos and other offensive captions. Previously, Jessica had tried to portray Benjamin's mistress as a family destroyer. Now, even more disturbing captions began to appear. She claimed that Meredith would get what she deserved, though she never specified what she meant. Meredith, the target of the harassment, began to fear that all of this could be dangerous. However, Benjamin insisted that Jessica had no history of violence, so he believed the situation would gradually settle down. He tried not to provoke her further, but it had little effect. The situation only worsened. When Jessica learned about the filing of a joint custody application by her husband, she was furious. Benjamin had always been a decent person, a valuable employee who earned a good salary and had no bad habits or addictions, so there were no serious grounds for denying him custody or terminating his contact with the children. He simply wanted to see them. Now that he had received the right to visit, which Jessica could not oppose. Due to the impossibility of taking revenge, she began to come up with more sophisticated ways to annoy him. Every short communication with Benjamin ended in conflicts and accusations. It was even more annoying to her that the mistress would be in contact with the children. During this period, Benjamin and Meredith regularly contacted the police to complain about Jessica's behavior. In particular, Meredith could no longer tolerate the publications that Jessica made about her daily on various social networks. She starts having problems at work when Jessica tries to turn things around her. Benjamin tried to prove that Jessica's behavior was stalking and very disturbing. Worse, he began receiving frightening messages from Jessica, all concerning the children. It seemed she was trying to intimidate him with ambiguous phrases, and he worried that his daughter might be in danger. In July 2017, after a court meeting, he called the police to check on the welfare of the children at Jessica's house. He described the situation in detail. He felt powerless since Jessica still interfered with the meetings, and he did not want to use force, fearing she would use this in court against him to strip him of his joint custody rights. The officers who responded reported that everything was fine, but the anxiety from the threats continued to grow. On July 12, they discussed joint custody again. All attempts by Jessica to prevent this were unsuccessful, making her even more furious. During the day, Benjamin begins to receive more disturbing messages from his ex-wife. It was obvious to her that there was no legal way to limit the children's communication with their father, so she tried to irritate him further with her frightening messages. Benjamin contacted the police again and asked the patrol officers to go to the family home to check on the children's well-being. When the officers arrived, they again did not see anything suspicious. The report compiled by the patrolman stated that everything was fine, the family seemed normal, Jessica behaved calmly, and her son and daughter were in a good mood while watching a movie when the officers arrived. At that moment, Jessica insisted that Harper call Benjamin, realizing that he had called the police. All of this became part of her insidious plan to expose him as a liar. While the officer was in the house, he discussed the potential resumption of relations with Benjamin. Jessica denied wanting to reconcile, calling him a traitor who had cheated for a whole year. She couldn't forgive him and intended to use this in court to achieve sole custody of their daughter. She didn't want him in the children's lives. While the officer was filling out the report, Jessica began insisting that Benjamin and Meredith were very dangerous people, especially to the children. She claimed to have suffered from their behavior since the divorce process began and insisted that they were trying to portray her in a bad light. Jessica wanted to obtain a restraining order against them. The patrolman informed Jessica that, in order to get a restraining order, she would have to go through the court process after filing a report. After saying goodbye to the officers, she promised to file a statement in person soon, but that was not destined to happen. The next day, while Jessica's family was out of town, she went to her parents' house early in the morning and took a .40 caliber pistol that they used for self-defense. When relatives heard about this, Jessica warned her father about the need for a weapon, and he was not against it. They did not suspect the scale of the persecution that Jessica had arranged. She skillfully lied, making Benjamin look worse and referring to the persecution from him, that the danger emanating from her ex. Jessica claimed that she could not feel calm at home, she was simply afraid to be left alone with her 2 children. They were easily convinced that Benjamin and Meredith posed a threat, including to the children, and that the weapon would help protect them from what she described as extremely harmful communication. All of this sounded plausible, therefore, her parents had no problem with her needing the weapon for a while. Jessica planned to keep the gun in the house while the divorce process was ongoing. Jessica then sent text messages filled with accusations, now targeting everyone who knew Meredith. She managed to find information about the family and friends of Meredith, copying the messages to everyone, then telling them how Meredith had stolen her husband, destroyed her family, and was now trying to take the children. Jessica obtained the phone numbers of at least 5 friends of family members on social media. It seemed she was immersed in this all day, displaying behavior that resembled madness. She even personally called several people, relaying her story over her mobile phone. Some of Jessica's acquaintances became disappointed in her decency, causing real damage to her reputation. Benjamin also received even more terrifying messages. Jessica openly accused and intimidated him, stating that he would not receive anything, he would not gain access to Meredith and the children. Jessica wrote that because of his actions, he would have no chance of getting any of it, as she would not allow him to enjoy life after what he had done. Benjamin was extremely worried about this information and began to send Jessica message after message, trying to understand what she meant. However, she simply ignored all his questions, which only increased Benjamin's anxiety. He expressed his willingness to go to court for an emergency hearing regarding joint custody of the children, even threatened to try to take the children from her if she did not calm down. Finally, Jessica responded with a short message, "Your life will soon be better." Benjamin was sure that she was just mocking him and enjoying this situation. Jessica claimed that it was the last day she would experience pain, after which she ignored any attempts by Benjamin to contact her. On the morning of July 13, 2017, Jessica wrote to Benjamin again. She offered to meet so that Benjamin could answer some questions. However, Benjamin found everything very suspicious and hesitated to attend the meeting. He didn't suspect that this could turn out to be a fatal mistake. Benjamin tried to get her to talk on the phone to understand what she needed and why they couldn't discuss it without a meeting, but this only made Jessica even angrier. At 4:41 p.m., he received another message in which Jessica complained that she was tired of this bullying that never meant anything to Benjamin. In reality, old accusations and the most frightening threats she had ever voiced since the breakup emerged. Jessica's behavior was so alarming that Benjamin contacted her mother to discuss the situation, suspecting that Jessica was having a breakdown. He feared she could not control herself, might pose a danger to herself and the children. At that time, he was at work and could not leave. He did not suspect that while he was talking to Jessica's mother, Jessica was already driving to his apartment with bad intentions. At about 5 p.m., Jessica parked her car near the complex where Benjamin and Meredith lived. In the parking lot, Jessica saw Meredith, who had just returned from work and was sitting in her car, distracted by the mail on her mobile phone. Jessica approached her, pointed a gun, and shot through the glass, instantly killing her rival, whom she considered the cause of all her troubles. All this happened in broad daylight. As people were returning from work, the noise attracted numerous witnesses. After the incident, people saw Jessica get into her car and drive away. Neighbors contacted the police, reporting this and clarifying one frightening detail. At that time, there were 2 children in the car with the shooter. Witnesses described the shooter, and the police understood who they were talking about. They assumed that Benjamin was in danger. Jessica had enough time to act, but she was not going to go to Benjamin's workplace. Instead, she devised something much more sophisticated and stayed one step ahead of law enforcement. While the authorities were still looking for her in the city and were awaiting Benjamin's arrival at work, Jessica called Benjamin, told him that everyone he loved had left and that she would be next. Then Jessica hung up. It was the last call she made. Police eventually traced the call and went to Easley, 7 miles from the Benjamin home, where they saw her Jeep. The doors of the car were locked from the inside, and the engine was still running. Inside, they found 3 bodies, 2 children and Jessica herself, who was 36 years old. Jessica had persistently called Benjamin in hopes of meeting with him, perhaps intending him to be her first victim. However, he seemed to sense danger and avoided contact as much as possible, often opting to respond via a message on a messaging app. When she received a refusal, she flared up in anger and attacked Meredith, after which Jessica returned home. Near her house, she called Benjamin again. After a meaningless conversation, Jessica first attacked her 5-year-old daughter, then her 9-year-old son, after which she turned the gun on herself. Jessica used the same gun that she had borrowed from her parents on July 11th. During the investigation, detectives found out that Benjamin had been trying to obtain a restraining order against Jessica. He had filed for joint custody on the same day and had communicated with the police officer who came to check on the children. Jessica left 4 suicide notes, one for her mother, one for her father, one for her son's father, and one for her husband. In these notes, she expressed her love for her family and her regret for the pain her actions would cause them. Jessica insisted that she could no longer live with these feelings and believed that her children would also suffer without her, so she decided to take not only her life but theirs as well. In the letter to her son's father, she expressed gratitude for giving her her first child and apologized for the pain she had caused. Considering the content of these notes, the police investigated suspicions of domestic violence against the children. Judging by what Jessica wrote, it was possible she had harmed them as a way of exacting revenge on her unfaithful husband. However, nothing like this could be confirmed. As for the last note left by Jessica to Benjamin, it contained several short phrases in which she wished that Benjamin would experience the pain from his cruel act for the rest of his life. The note also stated that he would not be able to hurt them anymore. Among all the individuals involved in this case, Benjamin was the only survivor. The note turned out to be prophetic. Even to this day, he continues to live with the pain of losing his loved ones. Hello again, true crime fans. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Angela Allen. In early 2012, Angela Allen was a 16-year-old high school student living in Van Buren, Arkansas. She was known for her positive and kind nature and was very religious, attending church regularly. Angela had a passion for children and dreamed of pursuing a nursing career in the future, with the goal of working in a hospital. She also loved animals and was always optimistic about life. Angela grew up in a dysfunctional family. Her father was abusive to her mother, but fortunately, he did not harm the children. However, he abandoned his family and had no contact with Cecilia or his children. After he left, Cecilia became involved with another man, who turned out to be cruel. She endured years of abuse from him. Later, Cecilia became addicted to illegal drugs and alcohol, which eventually resulted in her losing custody of her children. Cecilia did not want her children to be placed in foster homes or boarding schools. Cecilia eventually agreed to let her mother adopt Angela and her brother. Although Cecilia visited them frequently, they were unable to develop a close relationship. Cecilia's mother was determined to provide her grandchildren with everything they needed. Although she was retired, she took on a part-time job to earn extra money. She raised the children in a loving environment, hoping they would receive a good education and become independent. Despite their efforts, finances were tight, and they had to save a lot. The children understood their situation, did not ask for much, and appreciated their grandmother's care. During her school years, Angela dreamed of having a computer and a mobile phone. She wanted to connect with friends on social networks and play games like other children her age. Angela often felt jealous of her friends who had these devices. However, she understood that her grandmother could not afford them, so she never pressured her to buy expensive things. Angela was usually modest, influenced by her strong religious beliefs. Nevertheless, every time she went to church, she prayed for a smartphone. Finally, her prayers were answered. On her 16th birthday, her grandmother saved enough money to buy her a modern mobile phone. Angela was so excited that she quickly created an account on social networks. Almost every day, she made new friends. However, this naive girl did not realize the potential dangers of sharing her phone number with strangers. Angela often received calls from unknown numbers, even late at night. This situation worried her brother, who was more aware of the potential dangers. He realized that Angela's naivety could put her in danger. One time, her brother answered a call from a stranger. The caller turned out to be a 30-year-old man to whom Angela had given her cell phone number via social media. Angela's brother threatened to report the man to the police if he did not stop contacting Angela. He reminded the caller that Angela was only 16, prompting the man to hang up. A stranger wanted to meet Angela, but it was clear that he had bad intentions. The situation worsened when Angela misrepresented her age on social media. In the photos, she looked older, which meant that the men did not realize they were talking to a minor. This led to a serious argument between Angela and her brother. Her brother then told their grandmother about the situation, and she spoke to Angela, explaining the potential dangers and the intentions of these strange men online. Angela began to understand the risks involved in her behavior and realized that it was not safe. She promised her grandmother that she would avoid such situations in the future. On the evening of February 10, 2012, Angela told her grandmother that she was going for a walk, which was her normal routine, as she usually liked to walk before going to bed. While her grandmother did the housework, Angela went for a walk. After a while, her grandmother fell asleep. When she woke up, she was shocked to see that Angela had not returned from her walk. She began to panic and went to the police to report Angela missing. She explained to the police that Angela had left the night before and had not returned home all night. The grandmother sensed that something was wrong because Angela had never been out this late before, and it was unusual for her to run away. They had not argued, and all of Angela's belongings were still at home. The police quickly arrived at Angela's grandmother's house, where they found her distressed and pleading for help in finding her granddaughter. She provided a photo and description of Angela, as well as details of what she was wearing when she left. Several patrol cars searched the area but found no trace of her. By this time, many neighbors had learned of the situation and joined in the search. Some spoke to the police to offer their assistance. Unfortunately, no one had seen Angela that night, so they were unable to provide any information about the direction she had gone. Angela's grandmother described her usual walking route, and the police checked several times but found no signs of an attack or any clues as to Angela's whereabouts. Days passed without any progress on the case. During this time, everyone in the area knew that Angela was missing. The local community grew increasingly concerned because there had been no ransom demands. She had not contacted anyone, and her social media accounts showed no activity. As the crucial 48 hours passed without any updates, the hope of finding Angela alive diminished. However, her grandmother remained hopeful until the very end. The FBI was brought in to assist in the search for Angela. Agents first focused on her social media accounts. They checked her cell phone and, surprisingly, over the weekend after her disappearance, Angela sent several text messages to family members, including her mother, brother, grandmother, and a friend. In these messages, she claimed to have a new boyfriend and said that she had left with him in a black Chevrolet Camaro to a nearby town about 2 hours away. She asked them not to bother her. The messages sent from Angela's phone raised suspicions. Her grandmother believed that the messages were written in a way that did not match Angela's usual writing style. She suggested that the messages may have been sent by someone else who was trying to distract the search. After sending those messages, Angela, who was usually very communicative, stopped responding to friends and family, which was completely out of character for her. FBI agents discovered hundreds of contacts, including Angela's relatives and friends. After reviewing the information, they noticed a man who had recently contacted Angela, which led to suspicions of his involvement in her disappearance. Lloyd Jones was brought in for questioning and was found to have a history of violence against women. During the investigation, FBI agents discovered numerous communications between Lloyd and Angela, indicating that he had been trying to convince her to meet for some time. Lloyd was considered strange, especially in his interactions with girls. In 2001, he was convicted of abuse after breaking into the home of a woman he had been stalking. He attacked her, threatened her life, and abused her before leaving the scene. The victim reported the incident to the police, resulting in Lloyd being sentenced to 10 years in prison. He was paroled after serving 7 years for good behavior. In February 2012, Angela, who had been communicating online with Lloyd for a long time, suddenly disappeared. The police suspected Lloyd of being involved in her case. Lloyd claimed to live in the same city as Angela. He said he was only 1 year older than she was and was studying at a nearby school. Their online friendship developed into a romantic relationship. He tricked Angela, gaining her trust to obtain intimate photos of her, but he didn't stop there. The day before Angela went missing, she received an invitation from Lloyd to meet on the evening of February 9, 2012. When Angela left home for a walk, she was dressed up and had put on makeup. She didn't tell her grandmother that she was meeting someone, but when she returned, she acted strangely. She seemed worried and was crying, but she didn't explain why. The following evening, Angela went missing. During questioning, Lloyd confessed that he had met Angela online, where they developed a friendship and eventually agreed to meet in person. He stated that she had claimed to be 19, which made him feel comfortable meeting her. On the night they met, he picked her up in his car near her grandmother's house. However, he began to suspect that she might be younger than she had said. After a brief conversation, Angela revealed that she was actually 16. This worried Lloyd, who feared that he might get into trouble with the law, so he asked Angela to get out of the car. They only drove a short distance before he dropped her off, and he did not wait for her to return home. He claimed that he never saw her again and insisted that he had nothing to do with her disappearance. It was clear that Lloyd was not telling the truth. Analysis of the text messages exchanged between Angela and Lloyd showed that she quickly admitted her true age of 16, and he did not dispute this. This meant that he knew her real age. When confronted with this contradiction, Lloyd began to avoid the question, claiming that he could not remember that part of their conversation. He suggested that he might have missed the text message. During questioning, he continued to adjust his story and eventually recalled that Angela had called her friend before leaving the car. He claimed that a few minutes later, a black Chevrolet Camaro pulled up and she got into it. This was the car mentioned in the text messages from Angela's phone. FBI agents and police were skeptical of Lloyd's claim. To determine whether he had indeed sent the messages on Angela's behalf, they needed to analyze their communications in more detail. Some parts of the conversation were redacted, but an agent was able to reconstruct the conversations. Police discovered a history of Lloyd's online activity that began long before Angela went missing. He targeted young girls, trying to lure them into meetings. He had attracted several victims. Police interviewed some of these girls, and one confirmed that she had met Lloyd online. They had been communicating as friends for a while, and he seemed nice to her. In reality, he had taken advantage of her loneliness as she was going through a breakup at the time. Unfortunately, she agreed to meet him, which led her to a warehouse where she was attacked. After the attack, Lloyd threatened her for a long time, using photos to intimidate her into silence and prevent her from contacting the police. The police do not believe that Angela went to see Lloyd willingly. Lloyd tricked Angela using a method he had successfully employed before. Evidence also indicated that he used some photos and attempted to arrange a meeting with her. After the first meeting, Angela did not want to continue the relationship. It was unlikely that she would have willingly gotten into his car. He probably knew that she had a habit of going for walks before bed and waited for her near her house. Lloyd's story kept changing. He began to provide new details about Angela and her friend. He claimed to have heard that Angela and her friend were planning to go to the Arkansas River. This information was verified, and he was found to be lying. The police went to Lloyd's house and, with his permission, searched the premises. They discovered that he lived there with his girlfriend, who insisted that she did not believe he had kidnapped Angela. She claimed that on the day Angela went missing, Lloyd was busy working in a warehouse near their home and had no time to go out of town. The police were particularly interested in the warehouse because he had attacked another victim there. Lloyd was reportedly laying floors on the day Angela went missing, and his girlfriend was convinced of his innocence because he came home covered in dirt and construction materials. The police requested items for forensic analysis, and Lloyd's girlfriend provided what they needed. They found traces of dirt on his pants and jacket, but his shoes were suspiciously clean, leading the police to believe he had changed them. After mapping the location of the warehouse, the police noted that it was also where Angela's cell phone had last been active. The police decided to search the warehouse, hoping this would help them find Angela. When the police and Lloyd's girlfriend arrived at the shed, they immediately noticed a disturbed area of land behind the building. The land belonged to Lloyd, but they needed official permission to conduct a thorough search. Lloyd initially agreed, but he later prohibited digging in that particular location. The police brought specially trained dogs with them, and one dog signaled near the disturbed area next to the shed, which was unusual. However, the police could not take further action without a warrant. Several police officers interviewed neighbors who may have seen something on the day Angela went missing or afterward. However, no one reported anything unusual. Some neighbors said Lloyd had been on the land for a long time, which was not unusual since he usually worked in his shed. The police then had to leave. Given the situation, it was important to act quickly before Lloyd could destroy any evidence. The police managed to obtain a warrant in a very short time. The next morning, the officers quickly returned to the scene with the necessary documents and specially trained dogs. They suspected that the Angela was no longer alive. The police focused on a specific area that had interested them the day before and began digging through 1/2 meter of loose soil. Forensic experts discovered a metal plate, and the search dogs became excited as they approached a steel plate. Underneath it, they found a blue plastic barrel that had been buried and sealed. It appeared that the barrel had been placed there recently, as the soil above it was still fresh and loose. The police then dug up the plastic bin. Inside, they found a body. The body was in poor condition and was immediately taken to the forensic lab, where the victim was identified as Angela Allen. The forensic expert concluded that she had been abused and that the cause of death was strangulation. Her grandmother needed psychological support to cope with the tragic news, even though the body did not require identification. On the day of Angela Allen's funeral, 16-year-old Angela was buried in the city center, attended by hundreds of people. There was now an urgent need to bring the killer to justice. The suspect, identified as Lloyd, had buried Angela on his property. DNA evidence linked Lloyd to the crime, confirming that he had strangled Angela, as indicated by marks on her neck. Although some time had passed since the murder, the cold February temperatures and the burial helped preserve much of the evidence, including the DNA. During a visit to his father in prison, Lloyd confessed to the crime. This confession was recorded and added to the case file. Lloyd's girlfriend later told the police that when he returned home that night, his clothes and shoes were covered in dirt and blood. She didn't think much of it at the time, but he must have discarded them afterward. With the overwhelming evidence against him, Lloyd's attorney didn't even attempt to argue for his innocence. Instead, the defense focused on the idea of an unintentional crime. During the trial, Lloyd changed his testimony. He admitted that he went with Angela because she wanted to watch the sunset. When Angela revealed that she was only 16 years old, he became upset. In a fit of rage, He pushed her into the river. After a while, he realized that she was not coming up for air. When he pulled her out, he discovered that she had drowned. However, this was all a lie. The medical examiner confirmed that Angela had not drowned. There were clear signs of strangulation on her body, and there was no water in her lungs. It is unclear why he chose to fabricate such a false story. Nevertheless, this obvious deception only strengthened the jury's belief in Lloyd's guilt. The prosecutor presented their version of events during the trial. Angela and Lloyd's first meeting took place on February 9. Angela, a teenage girl, had dressed up for a date with someone her own age, but became frightened when she encountered an adult man instead. She refused to get in his car and go home with him, which upset her. Lloyd was determined not to give up. He tried to convince her to meet again. When his attempts failed, he resorted to threatening her by saying that he would share her private photos with all the students at the school. Terrified, Angela agreed to meet him, but this time, she would not survive. He attacked and abused her, then strangled her. The jury quickly returned a verdict. Lloyd Jones was sentenced to 60 years in prison for Angela Allen's death, without the possibility of parole. He was also sentenced to an additional 30 years, which included 10 years for desecration of a corpse and 20 years in prison for using inappropriate photos of minors. However, things changed. After serving just 4 years of his sentence, Lloyd escaped. At the time, Lloyd was incarcerated at a correctional facility in Brick, Arkansas. He regularly worked at a construction site, where he gained the respect and trust of others. Eventually, Lloyd escaped. Angela's family was notified in time, as they were potential targets. Every available resource was mobilized to capture him. Residents were informed through the news on radio and television, and updates were spread via text messages and social media. Police searched the area for 3 days and eventually found Lloyd, who was hiding in a wooded area near the prison. He was arrested again and returned to prison. He is currently serving time in a maximum security prison in Arkansas. Angela's family was devastated by her loss, and the unexpected escape of the criminal caused widespread concern. The grandmother felt guilty for not paying enough attention to her granddaughter, not checking her social media messages, and trusting her own judgment. She realized that she had allowed this criminal into their lives. Driven by a desire for justice, Angela's grandmother led the effort to create a petition called Angela's Law. The law requires closer monitoring of abusers. It has successfully passed through all necessary channels and is now in effect. Hey detectives, welcome back. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Lauren Malt. While at university, Karen met Nigel Malt, a man with ambitious career goals. Their relationship started off well and seemed promising for starting a family. Although Karen's mother was concerned about Nigel's rude behavior, she chose to ignore this advice. They later married and had a daughter, Lauren Malt, who was born on April 8, 2002. Initially, Karen and Nigel's life together appeared happy, and they seemed to have a bright future ahead of them. However, over time, Nigel began to manipulate Karen. He used typical abuser tactics, suppressing her emotions with lies and appealing to her feelings of pity, which made her dependent on him. She was financially dependent on her husband and was unable to continue her studies due to pregnancy, making it difficult for her to find a job later on. Nigel had a long history of addiction to alcohol and prohibited substances. By this time, he was unable to function without these substances, which led to serious consequences for his life and family. Nigel had been a kind person before, but as his addiction worsened, his personality changed dramatically. He became aggressive and cruel toward Karen. Nigel's violent outbursts increased, and he began to take his anger out on Karen, eventually leading to physical abuse. Things worsened when their daughter, Lauren, observed the abuse. Despite this, Karen fought hard to save the relationship. By the time she could no longer take it, they had 4 children together. The thought of divorce was terrifying, especially with a long legal battle ahead. Their joint assets were minimal, and the prospect of being a single mother to 4 children worried Karen. She was particularly stressed about child support and custody, fearing that her husband Nigel might try to gain custody of the children just to hurt her. At this time, everyone was tired of Nigel's irresponsible behavior. He used to earn money and support his family, but now he had started to waste almost all of his income on alcohol and prohibited substances. Karen was very concerned about the impact this had on their children, who were growing up in fear. Their father drank every day and often abused their mother in front of them. This situation could not go on forever, but Karen was patient for a long time. Despite her family and friends urging her to leave him, she stayed for the sake of her children. It became clear that Nigel could not change. Karen decided to talk to Nigel about getting a divorce, which led to another angry outburst from him. He refused to pay alimony, making his stance clear to her. However, she and the children no longer wanted to live with someone so dangerous. The conversation ended in another conflict, filled with threats, which only strengthened Karen's resolve to leave her unfit husband as soon as possible. In March 2021, Karen reported Nigel's violent behavior to the police after a violent fight broke out while he was drunk. Karen later withdrew her testimony to spare him trouble, hoping that he would cooperate and consider a peaceful divorce. However, his failure to take responsibility made the situation worse. In April, Karen experienced an even more severe beating, which left her terrified for her life and concerned for her children. Realizing she needed to take action to end the abuse, she contacted the police again to report the domestic violence. Taking advantage of the moment Nigel was taken to the police station, she decided to escape with her children to her mother's house. However, he posted bail and was released while awaiting further legal action. He was placed under house arrest and tried to manipulate her emotions by claiming he would end his life. But this no longer affected Karen. She was determined to act strongly and see things through to the end. To show Nigel that she was serious, she attempted to obtain a restraining order, but unfortunately, this effort failed. During this time, financial troubles worsened, leading Nigel to drink more heavily and become increasingly aggressive, cruel. He could not control his anger, treating not only his wife poorly, but also Lauren and their sons. Finally, Nigel was found guilty of domestic violence and received a suspended sentence. He was prohibited from contacting Karen and the children. During this time, he lost everything. Karen left him and refused to listen to any excuses or promises. He also lost touch with his children, who were no longer interested in seeing him because of his unpredictable and cruel behavior. Alcohol, which he had developed a daily habit of consuming, was banned, and he was unable to control his addiction. It appeared he was using alcohol as a way to cope with the hope of reconciling with his wife. However, Karen was firm in her decision and demanded a divorce. All of this has left Nigel feeling demotivated. Despite his promises to stop using prohibited substances, his condition worsened. He claimed this was due to his need to cope with his problems. The issue of alimony needed to be addressed, as it was nearly impossible for Karen to support 4 children alone. Karen found a job as a salesperson, but her income was insufficient. To help, their daughter Lauren took on several part-time jobs. Meanwhile, Karen's lawyer reassured her that she didn't need to worry about custody. Nigel was a severe alcoholic, and due to allegations of violence, he could be completely barred from seeing the children. At this time, Lauren's relationship with her father, Nigel, was strained, so she only wanted to communicate with her mother. During this time, Karen and her children lived in her grandmother's house in a small village called West Winch in Norfolk County, UK. Lauren turned 19 during this time and was dating a guy named Arthur. On Sunday, January 23, 2022, Arthur took Lauren to work at the store where she was employed as a salesperson. Throughout the day, Nigel called his daughter, Lauren, multiple times. It was unclear what he wanted, but she suspected he was in an unstable state. To avoid distractions at work, she chose not to engage in any conversations. After a long and tiring shift, Lauren returned home, hoping to unwind with her boyfriend before starting her next shift the following day. She was working hard, including overtime, to save money for her education. That evening, Nigel began calling again. It was clear he was not sober. Lauren decided to ignore his calls, hoping he would calm down. However, he was relentless, calling 19 times between 6:25 p.m. and 6:52 p.m. Despite the constant ringing, Lauren remained silent. Unfortunately, ignoring Nigel was no longer an option. He lived just 10 minutes away, making it easy for him to show up unannounced. At around 7:01 p.m., Nigel called Lauren, and she answered out of fear that not responding would escalate things further. Their conversation was brief and quickly turned hostile, filled with insults and threats. Lauren tried to calm her father, but her efforts only seemed to infuriate him more. According to Arthur, Nigel arrived at Lauren's house at 7:21 p.m. while Karen was at work. He was clearly drunk and acted aggressively. Lauren stepped outside, attempting to de-escalate the situation, but he responded with insults and tried to provoke a fight. He swung the crowbar and nearly hit her several times. After several attempts to grab her, he threatened to attack Arthur, who had been with her. Eventually, Lauren prompted Nigel to leave, expressing her desire to avoid further communication with him in that state. Lauren attempted to get Nigel into the car to make him leave, but unexpectedly, he began screaming again. He jumped into his car, and just as Lauren was behind it, he suddenly reversed and ran over his own daughter. He paused for a few seconds, staring at her through the windshield. She was seriously injured, bleeding and screaming for help, but he did nothing. He didn't even get out of the car or call for an ambulance. Instead, he pressed the gas pedal and ran over Lauren a second time. It all happened so fast that Arthur couldn't react in time to assist her. The commotion drew the attention of neighbors, who called the police. One man rushed into the street, trying to stop Nigel, the crazed driver. Nigel saw Lauren lying on the ground, moaning in pain with serious injuries, but she was still alive. The neighbor realized that calling an ambulance was urgent, as Lauren had sustained injuries that would prevent her from being moved. However, Nigel was indifferent and insisted that everything was fine, claiming Lauren only had a few scratches. He pushed away the neighbor and Arthur, who were shouting at him to stop and call for help. Instead of calling emergency services, Nigel picked up Lauren and placed her in the passenger seat of his car. As he did this, Lauren moaned in pain, especially when Nigel tried to push her into the car. She was unable to sit up straight or maintain her balance due to her injuries, which likely included fractures. Nigel didn't even buckle her seatbelt, causing her to roll onto the floor in front of the passenger seat. While driving, he called his ex-wife, Karen, and began to tell a confusing story about an incident in which he accidentally injured Lauren. He was drunk, and his explanation was muddled. Karen didn't fully understand what was happening, but decided to wait for Nigel to arrive at her workplace. Nigel insists that Lauren is not seriously injured and wants to inform Karen so that Karen can take her to the hospital. He admitted that he couldn't do it himself because he had been drinking and was afraid of losing his driver's license. He drove directly to the parking lot in front of the store where Karen worked. Upon seeing Lauren's condition, Karen realized that Nigel had downplayed the severity of the situation. Lauren was in critical condition, and Karen struggled to lift her from the floor into a seat. During this time, Nigel merely watched in silence. Lauren showed no response. It appeared she could lose consciousness from the pain. Eventually, Karen called for an ambulance. Lauren was taken to the hospital, where doctors quickly realized her injuries were severe and could only be treated at a specialized medical center. They did everything possible to save her life. Unfortunately, a few minutes after she was on the operating table, her heart stopped beating. Meanwhile, the police arrived at the scene where Lauren was stabbed. There, they met Arthur and the neighbors, who witnessed the horrific incident. Bloody tire marks were visible on the driveway, evidence left by Nigel. Unlike many other crimes, there was enough evidence to bring immediate charges. The medical examiner evaluated the injuries of Lauren, who was the victim of a double car crash. She suffered a broken back, which caused her to lose her balance and fall onto the car floor. Her rib cage was severely damaged, multiple ribs were broken, her lungs were torn, and she experienced significant internal bleeding. The traumatic injuries to her chest and abdomen were fatal, as many of her internal organs were crushed or harmed by bone fragments. It was clear that she had been run over by a car, and she might have survived the first collision. After the second collision, she might have had a chance of survival if she had not been pushed into the car by Nigel and fallen, and if paramedics had been called immediately. Unfortunately, her fall to the floor of the car made her condition worse, and the delay ultimately claimed her life. Nigel Malt was quickly apprehended. It was discovered that he was highly intoxicated, with a blood alcohol level more than twice the legal limit for driving. Karen believed his aggressive behavior was solely due to alcohol or prohibited substance use. After his arrest, Nigel refused to cooperate with authorities. Nigel provided basic details about his name and address to the police, but refused to discuss the incident. During the preliminary hearing, he denied any wrongdoing, despite clear evidence against him. He explained that he went to see Lauren that evening after she didn't answer his calls, and then spoke to him rudely. He tried to talk to her, but she was unresponsive because he was leaving and planned to talk later. As he backed his car out, he felt a slight thump, but assumed he had hit a box or a rock that he hadn't seen in the rearview mirror. He had no clue that he had run over his own daughter. When he backed up to check what he had hit, he accidentally ran over her again. This is clearly a dishonest excuse from a coward who dares not admit his guilt. The detectives observed how unemotional he was when discussing his daughter's death, and it seemed to have no effect on him. In conversations about his family, he often spoke of Karen and Lauren with disdain. This situation was completely baffling. Nigel's wife Karen was a good woman devoted to her family. Lauren grew up to be just like her mother, a decent person. Despite the difficult home life caused by Nigel, she avoided alcohol and other harmful substances. Instead, she focused on her education, career, and improving her life. The neighbor and Lauren's boyfriend Arthur contradicted Nigel's assertion that the incident was accidental. They claimed that after Nigel ran over her while reversing, he paused for a few seconds, shining his headlights on her. Nigel could not have missed her at that moment. Then, he intentionally ran over her a second time. This could not have been an accident. Even if he didn't see her the first time, she was clearly in his line of sight the second time. The neighbor claimed that there was a conflict between Nigel and Lauren that evening. He described Nigel as aggressive and unkind. Even when Nigel hit Lauren with his car, he showed anger on his face and did not stop. The neighbor believed that the violence started because Lauren was simply asking him to leave. The police have obtained new evidence. While the neighbor attempted to talk to Nigel, several local residents recorded the incident with their cameras and phones from their windows. This footage was later presented in court. It clearly showed Nigel intentionally running over Lauren, and the prosecutor's office argued that the initial incident was also not an accident. Even the defense lawyer acknowledged that what happened could hardly be seen as a mere coincidence. The defense attorney focused on arguing that the murder was unintentional, but this argument lacked credibility. However, the bloody tire tracks and Nigel's tire tracks were a perfect match. Given the undeniable evidence, Nigel Malt was found guilty. In September 2022, a hearing was held where the sentence was announced. Nigel Malt was sentenced to life in prison, with a minimum of 18 years before he could apply for parole. The court noted that Karen's claims of domestic violence were considered when determining the sentence. Karen's family made it clear that they would remain involved. Karen stated in a media interview that she would attend every parole hearing to ensure that Nigel did not get released. At the sentencing hearing, Nigel relied on crutches for support throughout the proceedings. He maintained his innocence, claiming the incident was an accident. Many believed he was trying to gain sympathy from the court by portraying himself as a victim, a tactic he often used with Karen. Others saw this as just punishment for a man who had killed a child. Karen had decided to proceed with the divorce, feeling ashamed to be associated with a man who killed his own daughter in a drunken rage. He had used his car as a weapon, running over her twice and leaving her no chance of survival. Given these circumstances, Karen felt the sentence was too lenient and believed Nigel should never be released. Karen argued that he was a dangerous and cruel man who had completely lost control due to excessive drinking and the use of prohibited substances. She warned that if he were released, he would continue to kill. It was only a matter of time. Notably, Nigel's sons have repeatedly stated that they would only feel safe if their father remained in prison for life. The case has created great public outrage, leading to much discussion about protecting children and spouses from domestic abusers. Activists are calling for harsher penalties for individuals like Nigel, including life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. However, no substantial changes have been made so far. On the morning of May 17, 2005, a 911 call came from a quiet home in Alexandria, Kentucky. A woman was screaming, claiming that someone had broken in and shot her husband. When the police arrived, they found the house in chaos. Drawers were pulled open, items were scattered everywhere, and broken glass covered the floor. In the bedroom, they discovered a man's body. Initially, it appeared to be a botched robbery, but something felt off about the situation. The children provided different accounts of the event, raising suspicion. Then, the police uncovered a crucial piece of evidence hidden deep inside the washing machine that changed the investigation. What truly happened in the Bosley home that morning? Robert Bob Bosley was born on August 6, 1962, in the small town of Alexandria, Kentucky. He grew up in a close-knit, religious family with his siblings. From an early age, Bob demonstrated a sharp intellect and a strong ambition. Although much of his early life is not well documented, it is clear that he started planning his future before he even became an adult. Bob dreamed of becoming wealthy and owning his own business. He began by offering chimney cleaning and minor roof repairs. With long hours, affordable rates, and a strong work ethic, he gained a reputation as a reliable and friendly worker. His hard work paid off. Eventually, Bob expanded his one-man operation into a successful business, Bosley Roofing and Chimney Sweep in Alexandria. Under his management, the company became known for its quality and reliability, attracting loyal customers and generating impressive profits. With a growing influx of money, Bob aimed for even greater success. He started buying rental properties, eventually owned about 20. These investments significantly increased his income, making him one of the most successful businessmen in the area. His newfound wealth allowed him to enjoy a lavish lifestyle, complete with sports cars, horses, an airplane, a large boat, and a collection of expensive firearms. His boat, frequently spotted on Lake Cumberland, became known for hosting wild adult parties filled with alcohol, music, and scantily dressed attendees. Bob met 18-year-old Amy at one of his favorite local restaurants. Amy, also from Alexandria, grew up in a working-class family and faced financial challenges, especially due to her father's struggles with alcohol. Despite these difficulties, she was determined to create a better life for herself. After graduating high school with top honors in 1986, Amy enrolled in business studies at a community college affiliated with Northern Kentucky University. To support her education, she worked as a waitress, where she met Bob. He was older, wealthy, and charming. Initially shy, Amy soon became captivated by his lifestyle. She began attending his infamous lake parties and quickly became a close friend of his. Eventually, Amy won Bob's heart. After 4 years of dating, they got married. This was a major change for Amy, who had transformed from her modest beginnings to marrying one of the most eligible bachelors in the area. They then started a family, welcoming their daughter Morgan in 1996 and their son Trevor 3 years later. Amy transitioned from her carefree party days to fully embrace her new role as a dedicated mother, swapping late nights at the lake for school events and parenting responsibilities. Bob was expanding his business and investments, but he found one aspect particularly frustrating: administration. Managing payroll, taxes, invoices, and contractors felt burdensome to him. He preferred spending time by the lake rather than being stuck in an office. On weekends, he often disappeared on his boat for days at a time, keeping his location a secret. Friends later noted that Bob seemed to be distancing himself from his family, becoming more involved in a life of indulgence, secrecy. Since Amy had a background in business administration, he asked her to take over the company's financial and administrative tasks. Initially, she was hesitant, but she eventually agreed. From that point on, Amy took charge of managing the company's finances, payroll, and tax responsibilities. The Bosleys seemed to be doing exceptionally well, living in a charming log cabin in the woods south of Alexandria while their dream home was being built close by. This future home was impressive, featuring 14 acres, stained glass windows, a stone tower, and Gothic gargoyles. To everyone else, the Bosleys represented the American dream. They were good-looking, successful, generous with their time, actively involved in their church and their children's school. Bob was known for donating services to low-income families, earning respect throughout the community. However, beneath this fairy tale facade lay a troubling reality. As the administrator, Amy had access to the company's complete financial situation. While Bob focused on expanding the business, the lake, and building their dream home, Amy secretly started redirecting company funds. Instead of paying taxes, she funneled the money into a personal account that was hidden from view. For years, this embezzlement went unnoticed, but the IRS eventually caught on. They sent multiple letters, made phone calls, and tried to schedule meetings, but Bob never received any of these communications. Amy had ensured that all IRS correspondence was sent to a private mailbox she controlled, fully aware that the government was closing in but thinking she could delay things indefinitely. On the morning of Tuesday, May 17, 2005, just days before their 15th wedding anniversary, everything changed. Around 5 a.m., Amy Bosley made a frantic 911 call. Her panicked voice filled the line until the call was abruptly interrupted by a loud crash. The dispatchers attempted to reconnect. Shortly after, law enforcement rushed to the Bosley cabin. When they arrived, they found Amy in shock, holding her children. Her sister soon arrived to take care of the kids while Amy was taken in for questioning. Police secured the area and contacted the crime scene unit. As daylight broke, more officers arrived to search the nearby forest with K-9 units and a helicopter, looking for what they suspected was a fleeing intruder. In the bedroom, they found Bob's lifeless body. He was kneeling beside the bed, leaning forward, and had multiple gunshot wounds. However, only 2 shell casings were found in the room, which added to the confusion. As detectives examined the evidence, they started to doubt the authenticity of the crime scene and the entire narrative surrounding it. Except for the children's rooms, the rest of the house was chaotic. Kitchen cabinets were left wide open, including those under the sink, which seemed odd for a thief to rummage through. A rear door had a broken window, indicating a potential entry point, but surprisingly, most of the broken glass was outside rather than inside. This inconsistency raised suspicions from the beginning. The disorder continued elsewhere in the house. In the bathroom, the mirrored cabinet was open, and prescription bottles were strewn across the floor. It appeared more like a staged mess than the result of a rushed intruder. According to Amy's 911 call, the alleged attacker had left quickly, so why was there such a mess? As crime scene investigators examined the house, detectives began interviewing Amy Bosley at the police station. She seemed shaken and at times distressed, but appeared confused, as if she was having trouble remembering the details of her story. Amy described the intruder as a white male with a nasal voice, bad breath, and a strong odor of urine. She claimed he burst in during the night. He attacked both her and Bob. She had 2 marks on her chest, which she said were from the assault. When detectives asked who might have wanted to harm Bob, Amy indicated that he wasn't very popular, suggesting he had a wild reputation that could have led to enemies among disgruntled employees. She specifically mentioned a contractor and longtime friend of Bob as someone with whom Bob had recently had a disagreement. However, the friend was quickly ruled out as a suspect. He had a solid alibi and was very upset about Bob's death. Panic spread throughout the Alexandria community as schools were closed for several days due to the fear of a killer at large. Residents struggled to accept that Bob, a kind and generous man known for his willingness to help others, had been brutally murdered in his own home. Meanwhile, detectives at the cabin searched for clues. They found only 2 shell casings near Bob's body, despite multiple gunshot wounds, prompting them to look in the basement. There, in the family's washing machine, they discovered wet clothing and, at the bottom, a folded cloth with 4 additional shell casings. It was puzzling. Why would a fleeing killer hide evidence in a washing machine inside the victim's home? Even more unusual was an aluminum baseball bat found nearby, showing fresh scratches and white residue. Further lab analysis would be necessary to understand its potential relevance. Amy has been released and can now reunite with her children, but new details are emerging. The crime scene looks suspiciously arranged. Valuables, including large amounts of cash, were left alone. Amy's emotional reaction seems insincere. She showed no tears or genuine sorrow. Investigators believe there may be hidden motives. Then, a significant development occurred. IRS staff visited the station after learning about Bob's death. They had been trying to reach him for months regarding an enormous unpaid tax bill of over $1.7 million. A meeting was set for the day Bob died. The IRS agents also revealed an odd detail. During a previous call, they had spoken to someone who claimed to be Bob, but the voice sounded strange, high-pitched and unnatural. They suspected it was a woman pretending to be a man, and that voice may have belonged to Amy. The motive is now clear. Amy, who was responsible for managing the company's finances, had embezzled millions of dollars by redirecting tax payments into her personal account. Bob, completely unaware of her actions, he will learn the truth as soon as the IRS is ready to confront him. To make matters worse, there were allegations of Bob's infidelities. His sister later told investigators that she overheard Amy say she would shoot Bob if he ever cheated on her or left her. At the time, it seemed like a joke, but it now felt like a serious threat. Despite the growing evidence against her, Amy Bosley continues to deny any involvement in her husband's murder. During her second interrogation, she insists that she loved Bob, even though their marriage had its issues. She acknowledges that they faced problems, as many couples do, but argues there was no reason for her to harm the father of her children. Investigators, however, have a different perspective. Ballistics tests confirm that all 6 bullets that hit Bob correspond to 6 casings found, 2 in the bedroom and 4 concealed in the washing machine. A crucial development in the investigation occurred when Morgan and Trevor Bosley, ages 9 and 6, were interviewed separately. Both children provided the same description of the events. They had gone to bed peacefully but were suddenly awakened by the sound of 6 gunshots, followed by the sound of glass breaking. In contrast, Amy reported that the glass broke first and then the shots rang out, indicating inconsistencies in her story. Additionally, the scratches on her chest, which she claimed were from a struggle with the intruder, raised suspicions. The marks were too symmetrical, resembling staged wounds rather than genuine defensive injuries. A closer look at her blouse revealed that it hadn't been torn during the supposed attack. Instead, It had been carefully cut with scissors and then ripped to make it look damaged. Less than 2 weeks after Bob was murdered, authorities arrested Amy Bosley and charged her with the crime. However, there was one critical piece of evidence still missing: the murder weapon. Eventually, the weapon was found, but the circumstances of its discovery are unclear. One account states that a pistol from Bob's gun collection was discovered hidden in Amy's handbag, behind a wardrobe. Another version suggests that the weapon was found later by Amy's sister, who had taken care of Amy's children and belongings that night. While going through Amy's purse, she allegedly found the gun and promptly informed a lawyer, who then turned it over to the police. Regardless of how it was obtained, ballistic testing confirmed that the gun matched the 6 shell casings found at the crime scene and in the laundry. Although the bullets recovered from Bob's body were too damaged to establish a direct match, the circumstantial evidence against Amy was substantial. As the trial opened, prosecutors presented a straightforward and damaging story. For years, Amy had secretly embezzled money from Bob's company by diverting tax payments to herself. She had managed to evade the IRS through mail redirection and deceit, but her luck had finally run out. On May 17, 2005, Bob was set to meet with IRS agents who were insisting on explanations. Amy understood what this meeting signified: being exposed, facing divorce, and possible prison time. In response, the once respected wife, mother, and community volunteer came up with a desperate plan. The night before her meeting with the IRS, Amy, with her children asleep nearby, quietly took one of Bob's guns. Some sources claim she sedated the children first. While Bob was asleep, she shot him. Although wounded, he woke up and tried to defend himself. Investigators noted the way he was injured suggested he lunged at her, unaware that she was the one holding the gun. In shock and bleeding, Bob was unable to overpower her. She attacked him again. By the end of the incident, Bob Bosley, who had built his wealth from nothing, and who had put his trust in Amy, was dead in the home they were planning to share. Amy, who once supported him, now faced charges for orchestrating his murder, not out of fear, but out of greed. Bob Bosley's carefully built life of luxury and respect crumbled in one night due to cold calculations. What was left was a broken family, a shocked community, and an unforgettable legacy of betrayal. She smashed the back glass door with a baseball bat, rifled through cabinets and drawers to create the illusion of a burglary. Next, she concealed 4 spent bullet casings wrapped in cloth at the bottom of the washing machine. To make her injuries look real, Amy lightly cut her chest with what appeared to be scissors and slashed her blouse to suggest a struggle. Finally, she concluded her act with a 911 call, her voice filled with panic and the scene meticulously staged. Forensic evidence presented a different perspective on the case. Laboratory tests showed that glass fragments found on the aluminum bat matched the pieces from the broken rear door. The bat, which Amy's children recognized as belonging to their family, had not been used by an intruder. Instead, it was used by Amy herself. The police found no footprints, vehicle tracks, or any signs of anyone fitting the description Amy gave. No one had entered or left the house that night. Investigators also uncovered details about the Bosleys' marriage. Amy believed Bob had cheated on her. Photos discovered in their safe, taken during wild parties at Lake Cumberland, revealed a secret lifestyle and confirmed at least one affair. While the emotional pain of betrayal was evident, the real motive ran much deeper. Amy had embezzled the large amount of money from Bob's company by skimming off funds and failing to pay taxes. She thought that by killing him, she could keep her secret safe. Without Bob, his assets could cover the debt, allowing her to keep the remaining funds. The defense argued that the bullet casings could have come from Bob's pockets after a trip to the shooting range, but the evidence against Amy continued to mount. Despite this, her lawyer pointed out that there were no eyewitnesses, no DNA evidence, and no clear connection between the bullet casings and the bullets found in Bob's body. This ambiguity provided a chance to influence the jury's decision. Fearing that Amy might be acquitted and wanting to protect the Bosley children from the trauma of testifying against their mother, the prosecutors offered a plea deal. This would allow Amy to avoid a trial, spare her children the emotional strain, and receive a lighter sentence. In return, she would admit her guilt without revealing what had happened to the stolen millions. On November 2, 2006, Amy Bosley appeared in a Campbell County courtroom wearing a green and white prison jumpsuit. Her expression was impossible to read. Before the sentencing took place, Bob's family spoke directly to her. His brother accused her of being a liar and a fraud, warning her that although she might gain her freedom one day, she would never escape the memories of her actions. He reminded her that every night, she would see Bob's face and remember the tears of his children who were left without a father. Bob's sister fixed her gaze on Amy and asked the haunting question that troubled them all: did he beg you to stop? The answer would never be known. Next, Bob's mother approached, heartbroken and shaking, as she read a letter expressing her grief for the final goodbye that never happened. Amy remained silent, looking down and wiping away her tears. The judge acknowledged the damage Amy had caused, not just to her husband, but also to her children, her community, and her own future. He sentenced her to 20 years in prison. According to Kentucky law, she would be eligible for parole after serving 85% of her sentence, which equated to 17 years in prison. On May 18, 2022, exactly 17 years after Bob was murdered, Amy Bosley, who was 54 at the time, was released from the Kentucky Correctional Institution for Women. Most news outlets barely covered her release, and her current whereabouts are unknown. Some speculate that she may be trying to find the millions of dollars she had embezzled. Bob is buried at St. Stephen Cemetery in Campbell County, Kentucky. He is remembered for his kindness, ambition, and dedication to his family, tragically killed by someone he trusted deeply. In retrospect, Amy's choices appear both tragic and irrational. She was not in financial distress, and her husband was not abusive. The IRS may have offered a solution to her financial issues, or if she sought revenge, a divorce could have made her wealthier and free. Instead, she opted for murder.